Chapter 999. Number 1 Yen Di smiled excitedly. Although he knew that Mo Lingtian's ranking wouldn't be low, he didn't expect him to be so hardworking and get 10th place. This was really a pleasant surprise. Who said the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty would get 3 spots in the top 10? Emperor Lan sneered. Hearing this, Supreme Jin's eyes turned extremely gloomy and he replied indifferently, "Supreme Jin, you've said enough today. You can shut your mouth now. This was merely an accident. Anyway, Yuan Zhao will definitely take first place among the new students this time." Supreme Emperor Lan's face stiffened slightly as he glanced at Supreme Emperor Jin with some fear. He did not say another word. Supreme Emperor Jin was stronger than him as he was a 3rd-level martial emperor. If he angered this guy, he would not have a good ending. Now that Yuanxing was ranked 11th, he had already ruthlessly humiliated Supreme Jin. Supreme Lan knew when to stop, so he did not say anything else. Bush. Another 3 figures flew out from the exit. Looking at the 3 figures, the Emperor Realm experts from the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty, the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty, and the Yellow Mystery Sect heaved a sigh of relief. A rare smile appeared on their solemn faces. They were the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty's Fenji, the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty's Yuan Tong, and the Yellow Mystic Sect's Huang Xian. Yuan Tong ranked 9th, Fenji ranked 8th, and the Yellow Mystic Sect's Huang Xian ranked 7th. Under countless envious gazes, the 3 of them also ascended the stage and enjoyed the gazes of the other geniuses. This was a privilege and glory that only belonged to the top 10 new students. After the 3 of them stepped onto the platform, they first looked at Mo Lingtian strangely, then looked at Yuanxing who was standing in the open space below. Their faces revealed a trace of contemplation. Yuanxing didn't make it into the top 10. Instead, it was an unfamiliar cultivator at the peak of the Supreme Being realm that obtained the 10th place. This naturally surprised the 3 of them. Yuanxing felt his cheeks burning. To think that he, who was at the middle stage of the Golden Venerate realm, could not win against an unknown peak Supreme Being. It could be said that this was a huge slap to his face. The 4 geniuses on the stage naturally didn't know what Yuanxing was thinking. Even if they knew, they wouldn't care too much. Since Yuanxing had no chance to enter the top 10 freshmen, there was a certain gap between them and him. No one would care too much about the weak. Now, 4 out of the top 10 freshmen had already been occupied. There were only 6 left. Therefore, the anticipation in the eyes of the people standing on the stage became even more intense. Many people even began to discuss who would be the first among the freshmen this time. The top 3 positions of this year's freshmen should be divided between the 3 Empyrean monsters. That might not be the case. Have all of you forgotten that exalted realm junior called Zhuan? This is a ruthless person who defeated both Yuanxing and Sky Origin. This child might also enter the top 3. What do you know? Sky Origin is only at the peak of the Golden Venerate realm. There's a big gap between him and the early stage of the Empyrean realm. If Yun Zhongyang makes a move, he can also crush Sky Origin. It's unlikely that Zhuan will be able to compete with the 3 Empyrean monsters. Bush. Another 2 figures flew out. Everyone's eyes focused on them. A blue-robed youth with a warm smile on his face and a golden-robed youth with sharp eyes flew out of the exit at the same time and appeared before everyone's eyes. It's Blue Smoke from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and Sky Origin from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. I wonder what kind of jade tokens they obtained? Some people in the crowd immediately recognized the 2 figures and whispered among themselves. "Show us your jade tokens." The dean smiled faintly. Lan Yen and Sky Origin nodded, and both of them took out their respective jade plates. The jade plate in Lan Yan's hand had the number 6 lit up, while the jade plate in Sky Origin's hand had the number 5. Clearly, Lan Yen was ranked 6th, and Sky Origin was ranked 5th. After showing their jade tokens, the 2 silently walked up the platform. Supreme Jin, who was originally gloomy, looked slightly better when he saw Sky Origin obtain the 5th jade token. Not long after Blue Smoke and Sky Origin came out, another beautiful figure appeared at the exit. This beautiful figure was dressed in light muslin, and her voluptuous figure was faintly discernible. Her entire person was like the bright moonlight in the night sky. The Emperor Realm expert of the Cold Moon Palace looked at this beautiful figure with a bright smile on his face. Needless to say, this beautiful figure was the genius of the Cold Moon Palace, Shi Quebec. However, Shi Ke was ranked 4th. This result was beyond the expectations of many people. Shi Ke from the Cold Moon Palace had always kept a low profile. Although he was a genius from the Cold Moon Palace, one of the 3 major sects, he was not as arrogant as the other geniuses. This caused many people to have no impression of Shi Quebec. However, now that she was ranked 4th among the new students, everyone began to pay attention to this quiet girl. Your Cold Moon Palace is really low-key. Shi Ke has been hiding her strength all this time, right? She only revealed her trump card in the last round and obtained the 4th ranking, right? Supreme Jean frowned slightly and said to the Emperor Realm expert of the Cold Moon Palace. Supreme Jean, you're too polite. Shi Ke has indeed hidden her strength before. However, compared to the eldest prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, Yuan Zhao, she is still too weak, the Emperor Realm expert of the Cold Moon Palace said politely. When Supreme Jean heard this, he nodded and a pleased expression appeared on his face. Since the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty had Yuan Zhao, the first ranking among the new disciples would definitely fall on Yuan Zhao. Only the top 3 are left. If I'm not wrong, the top 3 should be Yuan Zhao, Palm Deity, and Yun Zhongyang. The first place will definitely be Yuan Zhao. As for the second and third place, it will be decided between Palm Deity and Yun Zhongyang. As soon as Supreme Jin's voice fell, another 2 figures flew out from the beast's head. The moment these 2 figures appeared in front of everyone, the entire station fell silent. The 2 people who had appeared were naturally Palm Deity from the Myriad Sword sect and Yun Zhongyang from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. As for why everyone suddenly fell silent, it was because the 2 people who had appeared were not in good condition. Palm Deity was in a better condition. Although he was a little battered and travel-worn, there was nothing special about him. However, Yun Zhongyang's condition attracted everyone's attention. This was because Yun Zhongyang's arms were empty. His arms had been cut off by someone. He looked extremely strange and miserable. At this moment, Yun Zhongyang also noticed the many gazes that were directed at him from around the station. His face immediately turned extremely gloomy. He had already expected the different reactions from the people after he had appeared. However, when he personally saw the strange gazes directed at him, Yun Zhongyang still felt humiliated. His anger towards Yun had reached its peak. Yun Zhongyang's arms were cut off? Who did this? Many people were puzzled. Supreme Jean was stunned at first. Then his eyes flashed with rage. He took a step forward and came to Yun Zhongyang's side. He placed his right hand on Yun Zhongyang's back and a surge of origin energy rushed into Yun Zhongyang's body. Then he took out many precious spiritual herbs from his spiritual ring. His origin energy turned into a origin energy fire and boiled the spiritual herbs into a medicinal liquid. Then he spread it all over Yun Zhongyang's arms. Then a miraculous scene appeared. Yun Zhongyang let out a painful roar. Then, new arms began to slowly grow out from his severed arms. Thank you, Supreme Jean. Yun Zhongyang cupped his hands and thanked Supreme Jean gratefully. From the way Yun Zhongyang addressed Supreme Jean, it was obvious that Supreme Jean was a general of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. If a general had the strength of an emperor, it seemed that the strength of these holy dynasties was unfathomable. Supreme Jean waved his hand. Then he asked with a sinister look, Crown Prince, who was so vicious to cut off your arms? Was it Yuan Zhao of the Alcade Holy Dynasty? Before Yun Zhongyang could speak, Supreme Jean had already walked over and said indifferently, Supreme Jean, are you not convinced? Yun Zhongyang was not strong enough. He deserved to have his arms cut off by Yuan Zhao. Obviously, Supreme Jean also believed that Yuan Zhao had cut off Yun Zhongyang's arms. Instead, he was proud of it. After all, Yun Zhongyang was also a heavenly venerable. But Yuan Zhao had cut off his arms. Unknowingly, Yuan Zhao's strength was far greater than Yun Zhongyang's. Yuan Zhao didn't cut off Yun Zhongyang's arms. They were Zhuowen's doing. Palm Master suddenly spoke calmly. Then, she took out the second jade token and stepped onto the platform. Since Palm Master was ranked second, Yun Zhongyang was naturally ranked third. Therefore, there was only one spot left for first place. Zhuan cut off his arms? Who's Zhuan? Supreme Jin and Supreme Lan were stunned at first. Their eyes were filled with confusion. They really didn't know who Zhuan was. It's the young man who broke through the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave as a supreme being. Yun Zhongyang said viciously and stepped onto the platform. Having his arms cut off was not something to be proud of. If he had lost his arms while being surrounded by 3 heavenly venerable evildoers, it would be a disgrace. Yun Zhongyang couldn't open his mouth and could only say something ambiguous. It's that guy. Supreme Lan and Supreme Jin looked at each other and remembered the young man who had rushed out from the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave. If a supreme being ant can injure you to this extent, it seems that the Blue Whale Holy Court's crown prince is nothing more than that. Supreme Jin's eyes flickered as he spoke coldly. Yun Zhongyang's eyes were cold and gloomy as he replied indifferently, "Is that so? The only spot left should be decided between Zhuan and Yuan Zhao because only the 2 of them have managed to break through the 10,000 Beasts Bridge and reach the other side. Do you really think that Zhuan is an ordinary supreme being?" Supreme Jin scoffed icily. The supreme being stage is still the supreme being stage. There's a huge gap between the supreme being stage and the heavenly venerable stage. Do you really think that Zhuan is a match for Yuan Zhao? Yun Zhongyang did not say anything else. He knew that Supreme Jin would not believe his words. After all, Zhuan's battle power was indeed shocking. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it either. 2 people have made it to the other side of the 10,000 Beasts Bridge this time? It seems that one of the 2 geniuses will be eliminated in the end. After all, there's only one Jade token on the other side of the 10,000 Beasts Bridge, and that Jade token represents the champion of this year's new batch, the dean said in astonishment. Everyone else nodded. It seems that one of the 2 remaining geniuses, Zhuan and Yuan Zhao, will be eliminated in the end. However, no one knows who will be eliminated and who will be the champion and receive the supreme honor. Just as everyone was speculating, a figure suddenly shot out from the beast's head, attracting everyone's attention. When they saw the figure, everyone was stunned for a moment before a look of understanding appeared on their faces. Supreme Jin's tightly knitted brows finally relaxed. This was because the figure that had rushed out was none other than Yuan Zhao. It seems that Yuan Zhao will be the champion of this year's new batch. The crowd muttered to themselves. Chapter 1000. The true number 1. When Yuan Zhao finally appeared from the beast's head exit, everyone on the platform knew that there was no doubt about who would become the number 1 new student. When Zhuan and Yuan Zhao crossed the 1000 Beasts Bridge one after another, everyone had already guessed that the number 1 new student would definitely be decided between Zhuan and Yuan Zhao. Now, Yuan Zhao was the first to appear from the beast's head exit, while Zhuan was nowhere to be seen. This was enough to prove that the number 1 Jade token was definitely obtained by Yuan Zhao, and that Zhuan should have met with misfortune in the fight with Yuan Zhao. It was even possible that he might have directly died. What a pity! Back then, Zhuan's performance in the second round was so eye-catching that even the dean personally invited him to enter the outer court. This kind of treatment is not something that anyone can obtain. Unfortunately, that Zhuan thought highly of himself and rejected the dean's invitation, choosing to continue with the test. Who would have thought that the result would be like this? If that Zhuan's cultivation was higher, he would not be afraid of Yuan Zhao at all. Unfortunately, his cultivation is too low, so it is understandable that he was defeated by Yuan Zhao in the fight for the number 1 Jade token. An uproar and discussions began to spread in the open space. Many people began to feel pity for Zhuan, but there were also many who took pleasure in his misfortune. With Big Brother taking action, that little bastard still wants to live? He still wants to compete with my Big Brother for number 1. He is simply courting death. Yuan Xing revealed a cold smile as he muttered. The 2 siblings, Jia Nan and Gatha, were deathly pale, while Emo Lingtian's brows were slightly furrowed. Clearly, this kind of result was somewhat unacceptable to them. Cheng Dong, you have to accept your loss. This time, Yuan Zhao is the new student king. Shouldn't you hand over your 9 twists treasure recovery pill to me? Qi Ji laughed complacently and unceremoniously spread his hands towards Cheng Dong. Cheng Dong's expression was somewhat ugly as he coldly said, "Let's talk about it after Yuan Zhao takes out the number 1 jade token. Why are you in such a hurry?" "Cheng Dong, you aren't still hoping that Zhuowen can create a miracle, are you? I think you should stop daydreaming. Only one person can obtain the first jade token. Now that Yuan Zhao has come out, but that Yuan hasn't. Needless to say, that Yuan should be dead in the grotto." Qi Ji crossed his arms and continued, "However, I'm in a good mood now. Since you insist on waiting, I'll wait with you. When the time comes, don't try to deny it." Qi Ji sneered, his gaze once again focused on Yuan Zhao, who was still in the air. Once Yuan Zhao landed, he should be able to take out the number 1 jade token. At that time, everything would be easy to deal with. Supreme Jin's smile grew even more radiant as he stood on the platform like a blooming chrysanthemum. Even though he felt that it was a pity that Yuan Xing had not managed to enter the top 10, Yuan Kong had managed to clinch 5th place while Yuan Zhao had clinched 1st place. This result was still very impressive. Boom, boom. Just as everyone's attention was on Yuan Zhao, a terrifying vibration came from the exit of the head. The entire Thousand Beast Grotto shook. What's going on? Why is the Thousand Beast Grotto shaking all of a sudden? Sensing the Thousand Beast Grotto's violent tremors, everyone's eyes were filled with fear. Some even looked doubtful. Some of the sharper ones immediately saw Yuan Zhao emerge from the exit of the head and fear filled their faces. It was as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. Boom, boom. All of a sudden, lava gushed out from the mouth of the beast's head and soared into the sky, forming a terrifying sea above the mouth of the beast's head. At this moment, everyone fell silent as they stared in shock at the terrifying sea of lava. They were very confused. Why was there such a terrifying sea of lava gushing out from the exit of the head? A sea of lava? Why would there be such a terrifying sea of lava at the exit of the head? An uproar immediately broke out. Not good. Yuan Zhao. Supreme Jin was the first to react. This was because he realized that the terrifying sea of lava was rushing towards Yuan Zhao. This sea of lava was far too terrifying. Most heavenly venerables would find it difficult to withstand this terrifying sea of lava. Swoosh. With that, Supreme Jin stomped his foot and golden light gushed out from his entire body. He turned into a golden ray of light and shot towards Yuan Zhao, who was above the sea of lava. Boom, boom. The endless sea of lava instantly churned with thousands of gigantic waves, forming a wall of lava that was 10,000 feet tall, blocking Supreme Jin outside. Get lost! Supreme Jin roared angrily as 9 dazzling golden stars surged out from his body in an attempt to blast the wall of lava in front of him apart. Boom, boom. Supreme Jin was indeed powerful, and he was much more powerful than Supreme Emperor Qin. As the 9 golden stars shot out, even the 100,000 feet tall wall of lava crumbled inch by inch under the might of the 9 golden stars. Unfortunately, the sea of lava was too large. Even though Supreme Jin had blasted the wall of lava in front of him apart, more and more lava continued to gush out, forming a terrifying wall of lava that seemed endless. No! Save me! Yuan Zhao's voice suddenly rang out from the center of the sea of lava. It was then followed by a blood-curdling scream before his voice came to an abrupt end. Yuan Zhao's figure had been completely submerged by the sea of lava at that moment. Supreme Jin's expression changed greatly as he unleashed a barrage of punches. Unfortunately, no matter how terrifying his power was, he could not break through the outer layer of the magma sea's defenses. At this moment, everyone on the platform was in shock. They had watched with their own eyes as Yuan Zhao was swallowed by the sea of lava from the moment he appeared. The entire process was bizarre and confusing. They had not expected this to happen at all. Yuan Zhao had appeared in front of everyone as they had expected. However, for some reason, such a terrifying sea of lava had appeared at the exit and swallowed Yuan Zhao whole. This scene was far too dramatic. The dean slowly rose to his feet. With a wave of his sleeve, a terrifying Yuan power formed a powerful light barrier around the platform, blocking off the incoming power of the lava. The dean's display of power was much more powerful than Supreme Jin's. It was no wonder that even Supreme Jin did not dare to act impudently in front of the dean. It turns out that the dean's power far surpassed Supreme Jin and the others. The sea of lava wreaked havoc in the sky above the exit for almost an hour before it finally stopped. Supreme Jin then retreated with a gloomy look in his eyes. The sea of lava was far too large. Even Supreme Jin found it difficult to reach the center of the sea of lava. He could only watch helplessly as Yuan Zhao was swallowed up. Another martial emperor from the Alcade sacred dynasty had also arrived in front of Supreme Jin. His expression was equally ugly as he asked in a low voice, "How is it?" Supreme Jin shook his head and turned his gaze towards the dean. "Dean, now, you should give me an explanation. Yuan Zhao was supposed to obtain the number 1 jade token, but why did such a terrifying sea of lava appear at the critical moment? I'm afraid that Yuan Zhao is most likely dead now. You have to give me an explanation." The dean's gaze was calm as he glanced indifferently at Supreme Jin. Then, he looked at the exit of the beast's head and smiled faintly. "What? Are you still not coming out? Kid, you've caused such a huge commotion. You should give this old man an explanation." The dean's actions immediately attracted the attention of the crowd. Soon after, countless pairs of eyes turned towards the exit of the beast's head. However, the exit had already been flooded by lava and there was no one left in sight. Could it be that the dean was deliberately mystifying things? Supreme Jin also turned his gaze towards the exit. When he realized that there was nothing but lava at the exit, his gaze turned extremely cold. He was certain that the dean was playing tricks on him. Just as Supreme Jin was about to explode, a clear voice suddenly rang out from the lava at the exit of the beast's head. "Dean, you're truly perceptive. Even though I was hiding here, you were still able to discover me." As his voice faded, the lava at the exit slowly parted, revealing the original entrance of the cave. A tall figure slowly walked out from the cave with a smile on his face and a calm gaze. "It's Yuan. He's actually not dead? Could it be that Yuan was the one who had unleashed that sea of lava?" That sea of lava was so terrifying. How did Yuan control it? Isn't this too unbelievable? An uproar, a clamor, and a cacophony of voices rang out around the station at this moment. The sound of so many voices intertwining together was deafening. Yuan slowly stepped out of the sea of lava and looked at the lava that was beginning to solidify in the sky. A trace of pity appeared in his eyes. This lava would solidify into rocks the moment it came into contact with the air outside. Hence, Yuan could only use this terrifying sea of lava attack once. Since he had used it this time, he would naturally not be able to use it again. "The first jade token is in your hands, right?" the dean asked with a smile. Even the dean was a little surprised by Yuan's way of making an appearance. This little guy always seemed to be a maverick. Yuan nodded. With a flip of his right hand, the jade token with strange runes engraved on the front suddenly appeared in his hand and was presented to the dean. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless gazes gathered on the jade token in Yuan's hand. Then, the entire station tacitly fell into silence. No one had expected that the first jade token would be obtained by Yuan, who was only at the Supreme Being realm. Such an outcome was beyond everyone's expectations. "Not bad. You're pretty good to be able to obtain the first jade token. Go up to the station," the dean said with a smile. Nodding, Yuan lifted his foot and walked towards the station. However, after taking a few steps, two figures appeared in front of him. Two terrifying murderous intents immediately locked onto Yuan. "What is the matter?" Yuan slowly raised his head and calmly stared at the two people in front of him. These two people were Supreme Jin and another martial emperor from the Alcade sacred dynasty. "Were you the one who released the sea of lava? Were you the one who killed Yuan Zhao?" Supreme Jin asked word by word. His voice was extremely cold. "Yuan Zhao recklessly fought with me for the first jade token. He deserved to die. In the rock cave, the strong live and the weak die. Are you going to interfere in the killing of a weakling?" Yuan replied indifferently. Boom. Chapter 1001. And no one has ever dared to kill a member of my Alcade sacred court in front of me. You're just a mere supreme being, so what kind of despicable method did you use to borrow such a powerful sea of lava to kill the first prince of my Alcaide sacred court? Supreme Jin glared daggers at Zhuo Wen as he questioned. What a joke! What despicable method did I use? The sea of lava was my own method. How did it become a despicable method in your mouth? Zhuo Wen's gaze turned cold. Supreme Jin was obviously trying to push the blame onto him. The people of the Alcaide sacred court were really shameless. They were trying to find an excuse to push the blame onto Zhuo Wen even though they had lost. That's right. My big brother was famous throughout his life. He was extremely talented. How could an ant like you compare to him? You must have used some kind of despicable method to kill my big brother. Yuan Sheng stepped out from the open space and pointed at Zhuo Wen as he shouted. At this moment, Yuan Kong also stepped out from the station. His eyes were filled with coldness as he stared at Sun. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Yuan Zhao was drowned by the sea of lava in front of everyone. Why are you saying that I, Zhuo Wen, used some kind of despicable method? Zhuo Wen said indifferently. And you, the loser, keep saying that I'm a supreme being ant. Back then, you lost an arm to me. What are you then? Aren't you worse than an ant? At this point, Zhuo Wen's sharp eyes stared coldly at Yuan Sheng, who was standing on the open space. The latter involuntarily took a step back with an ugly expression on his face. You're still trying to quibble? I think you're really courting death. Not only did you use despicable methods to snatch Yuan Zhao's first place, you even used some kind of despicable method to kill Yuan Zhao. A despicable and shameless person like you doesn't have the right to enter the Divine Academy. As soon as Supreme Jin finished speaking, a terrifying energy burst forth. Instantly, 9 golden stars descended from the sky and smashed down toward Zhuo Wen, intending to crush Zhuo Wen to death. Everyone in the station was stunned. No one had expected Supreme Jin to attack at this moment. In fact, there had been no warning at all. Furthermore, Supreme Jin's attack was extremely terrifying. He had used his full strength. No matter how heaven-defying Zhuo Wen was, it was impossible for him to survive this attack. After all, Supreme Jin was a terrifying existence at the Third Heaven Emperor realm. Even a cultivator at the peak of the heavenly venerable realm would be annihilated in an instant before him. Boom, boom. However, just as the 9 golden stars were about to reach the sky above Zhuo Wen, an even more terrifying power exploded. Then, the 9 terrifying golden stars were annihilated at the same time as Supreme Jin was pushed back by this power. Whoosh! A kind-looking old man stood in front of Zhuo Wen. However, the old man no longer had a gentle smile on his face. Instead, his expression was cold and his eyes were filled with coldness. Supreme Jin. Zhuo Wen is this year's newcomer king of the outer yard. You attacked me without even greeting me. What is the meaning of this? The old man was the headmaster. At that moment, the headmaster shouted coldly. Supreme Jin was stunned. Soon after, his expression changed and he quibbled, Dean, don't be deceived by this fellow's one-sided words. Do I need you to interfere in my affairs? Are you the dean of the outer court or am I the dean of the outer court? The dean's gaze had turned even colder. Supreme Jin was really pushing his luck. Supreme Jin's expression froze. He then joined his fists and said, Please calm down, Dean. I was too impulsive just now. The dean glanced indifferently at Supreme Jin. He then flicked his sleeves and said, You must remember that this is the splendid Spirit Island and not the Alcaide Sacred Dynasty. If you dare to kill Zhuo Wen or any other student of the outer court on the splendid Spirit Island, I will kill you. Not even the Holy Lord of the Alcaide Sacred Dynasty will be able to save you. Supreme Jin's heart trembled when he heard these words. The dean was really ruthless. He had actually said such harsh words. It was obvious that he was protecting Zhuo Wen. If he really dared to touch Zhuo Wen, the dean would most likely do as he said and kill him. Based on the splendid Spirit Island's background, if the dean really killed him, the Holy Lord of the Alcaide Sacred Dynasty would not be able to save him. The rest of the people on the station were also shocked. The dean's words were too ruthless. For the sake of Zhuo Wen, the dean had even dared to kill Supreme Jin. Who else would dare to touch Zhuo Wen on the splendid Spirit Island? After saying these words, the dean led Zhuowen up the station. Zhuowen was a little surprised by the dean's attitude. Although his talent was indeed strong and he had obtained the first place among the new students, Zhuowen always felt that the dean's attitude towards him was completely different from the others. At this moment, the other 9 geniuses on the station were looking at Zhuowen with extreme fear. They were well aware of how terrifying Yuan Zhao was. Yuan Zhao was a mid-heavenly venerable and his battle prowess was also far superior to other geniuses. However, he still could not win against Zhuowen, who was only at the Supreme Being stage. Brother Zhua, I really did not expect you to be so fierce. You're clearly only at the Supreme Being stage, but your battle prowess is monstrous. Even Yuan Zhao was killed by you. Mo Lingtian came to Zhuowen's side and smiled bitterly. Back then, on the deck of the boundless sailboat, Yuan had fought Yuanxing and cut off one of Yuanxing's arms. At that time, Mo Lingtian had already thought that he had overestimated Zhuowen. However, after the outer court's recruitment test began, Zhuowen broke records and norms again and again, causing Mo Lingtian to be shocked again and again. It was only in the end that Mo Lingtian realized that he had not overestimated Zhuowen, but had underestimated Zhuowen's strength. After this period of contact, Mo Lingtian also realized that he could not see through Zhuowen anymore. Zhuowen's body seemed to be shrouded in layers of fog. Only when he lifted one layer and thought that he had completely seen through Zhuowen's secrets did he realize that there was another layer of fog within this layer. It was as if there was no end to it. Zhuowen shrugged and said ambiguously, "Actually, there was a bit of luck involved." Mo Lingtian shook his head. Naturally, he did not believe Zhuowen's words. However, he was also very smart. He knew that Zhuowen did not want to explain too much on this topic, so he did not ask too much. After exchanging a few words with him, he silently waited for the dean's arrangements. This time, the outer court's recruitment test has completely come to an end. This old man is very gratified because the quality of this batch of new students is very good. I believe that you all already have a solid foundation. To be able to enter the outer court, you all did not rely on luck, but on your strength to fight for it. Previously, you all were the top geniuses of your respective factions, and your foundations were very good. However, this old man wants to tell you that your martial path has only just begun. You all are geniuses, but the title of geniuses only applies to your respective regions. But now, you have already entered the Divine Academy, so you are a student of the Academy. Moreover, this old man can clearly tell you that your talent and strength in the entire outer court is actually not very strong. In the outer court, there are many people who are younger than you and stronger than you. Therefore, after entering the outer court, do not be arrogant because of your talent. That will only ruin your talent in vain. When the dean said this, he saw that many of the 500 people had a trace of disapproval in their eyes. He knew that his words did not have much of an effect. However, the dean was not discouraged. There were far more geniuses in the outer court than in the outside world. Once these little fellows truly entered the outer court, they would know how high the sky was and how deep the earth was. Alright, this old man has said what needs to be said. Now, the top 10 new students will follow this old man. The 7 of you will be responsible for the remaining people. The dean instructed the 4 old men behind him, as well as Chengdong, Hu Jia, and Qi Ji. Then he led Zhuowen, Yun Zhongyang, Pom Pom, and the rest of the top 10 geniuses out of the place. Looking at the departing figure of Jun, Supreme Jin and the other martial emperor looked extremely gloomy. This time, the Alcade sacred dynasty had suffered a great loss. Yuan Zhao was the strongest genius of the Alcade sacred dynasty. It would not be a problem for him to ascend to the martial emperor realm. Moreover, if there were some opportunities, he could directly break through to the middle-level martial emperor realm. Moreover, the sacred lord of the Alcade sacred dynasty had the intention of passing the throne to Yuan Zhao. He was only waiting for Yuan Zhao to complete his studies in the Divine Academy before ascending to the throne as the new Alcade sacred lord. But now, because of that despicable Zhuowen, Yuan Zhao had died in front of them. Moreover, his corpse was not even left behind. They would not be able to report back to their superiors. Just as Supreme Jin and Supreme Jin were frowning miserably, A figure suddenly appeared next to them and said a few words to them. Supreme Jean and Supreme Jean, who had been frowning miserably, suddenly became cheerful. Their eyes even flashed with a deep cold light. After the dean led the top 10 new students away, the 4 old men, Cheng Dong, Qi Ji, and Hu Jia began to arrange the remaining new students behind them. Qi Ji, don't go yet. Our bet from before still stands. Hand over the chips, will you? Cheng Dong suddenly walked in front of Qi Ji and said excitedly. Even Cheng Dong did not expect that Zhuowen would really win the title of newcomer king this time. One should know that the kid was only in the supremacy stage and already had such shocking combat strength. If he were to advance to the golden supremacy stage or even the heavenly supremacy stage, wouldn't his combat strength be even more terrifying? Cheng Dong was certain that if Zhuowen's cultivation base were to advance to the heavenly supremacy stage, his combat strength would be comparable to a martial emperor realm powerhouse. To have the strength of a martial emperor before becoming a martial emperor, such a monstrous genius was very rare in their outer court. Perhaps only those monstrous geniuses who were ranked at the top of the heavenly supremacy ranking could achieve such a feat at this moment. Qi Ji's face was green and white. Even he did not expect such an outcome. It should have been a bet that was in the bag, but it ended in such a way that he felt helpless. Not only did the mid-level heavenly supremacy Yuan Zhao not win the title of newcomer king, he even lost his life. Qi Ji really did not expect this. Qi Ji, are you going back on your word? I was also present at that time. You can't go back on your word. Hu Jia also came over and said with a grin. Qi Ji's expression turned even uglier. He snorted coldly and took out the shield-shaped low-grade royal rank spiritual treasure that he had promised. Chapter 1002. Arcane Tower and Cultivation Tower. Qi Ji's face sank. The heaven-raising sword was his natal spiritual treasure. If he lost it, it would have a huge impact on his strength. Looking at Qi Ji's appearance, Cheng Dong didn't know what the former was thinking. He frowned and said, Qi Ji, are you going back on your word? Qi Ji coldly snorted and said, Cheng Dong, don't worry. I, Qi Ji, am not that despicable. However, the heaven-raising sword is my natal spiritual treasure. This thing is too important to me. Moreover, you are not a sword cultivator. What use is it to you? Therefore, I plan to use the equivalent contribution points to exchange for the heaven-raising sword. Cheng Dong frowned and nodded. The heaven-raising sword is indeed of no use to me. Use contribution points to exchange for my agreement. With the value of the heaven-raising sword, 100,000 contribution points shouldn't be too much, right? Hearing this, Qi Ji's face turned green. Why didn't Cheng Dong just rob him? 100,000 contribution points was something that would take him at least a few years to accumulate. However, thinking of the importance of the heaven-raising sword, Qi Ji finally agreed to Cheng Dong's conditions and transferred 100,000 contribution points to Cheng Dong. After receiving the 100,000 contribution points, Cheng Dong was in a good mood. Naturally, his impression of Zhuowen increased. If it weren't for Zhuowen, he wouldn't have been able to obtain 100,000 contribution points so easily. A series of sonic booms cut through the sky above the main city of Excellent Spirit Island. They arrived at the center of the main city. In the center of the main city, there was an extremely large building complex. There were tall towers, pavilions, gardens, fake mountains, and the fragrance of flowers. Moreover, in this complex, there were many young warriors coming and going from time to time. It looked very lively. This is the core of the main city, the outer court of Excellent Spirit Academy. In the future, you will be cultivating here for several years. The dean pointed at the huge complex below and smiled at the 10 freshmen behind him. Zhuowen also followed behind the dean, looking down at the buildings below. His gaze had a trace of emotion. The size of the main city was already exaggerated enough, but the core of the main city, the Divine Academy, was even more shocking. It actually took up half of the main city's surface area. The entire outer courtyard was like a small world with its own ecosystem. Inside, there was practically everything. The facilities were complete, and Zhuowen discovered that there were 2 buildings that stood out from the rest in Excellent Divinity Institute. Both of these structures were in the shape of towers. One of them was covered in countless strange runes that radiated with terrifying destructive power. Zhuan could tell with a single glance that the runes on the tower were the work of an arcanist, and a very high-grade one at that. As for the other tower-like building, its surface was actually red and blue. Zhuan also discovered that in this red and blue tower, the red one was rolling with blazing heat, while the blue one was releasing a terrifying cold air. It was as if the energy of ice and fire had perfectly fused together in this tower. Everything seemed so harmonious. The ice-fire holy rune is moving? When Zhuan's gaze was focused on the red and blue tower, the ice-fire holy rune on the back of his hands suddenly started to move. Fortunately, Zhuan forcefully suppressed this strange movement so that no one else could discover it. However, Zhuan's gaze was fixed on the red and blue tower. This tower that possessed the fusion of ice and fire energy definitely had an inseparable relationship with the ice-fire holy rune. This tower should have a trace of the ice-fire holy rune's origin? Xiao Hei's voice quietly sounded in Zhuan's mind, causing Zhuan's pupils to shrink. Another trace of origin? Could it not be the original body of the ice-fire holy rune? Zhuan suddenly asked. Xiao Hei shook her head and said, "Could it be that you don't remember what the rune spirit of the ice-fire holy rune said? That fellow said that his original body was in the Hall of Ice and Fire in the Divine Academy's inner courtyard. This is only the outer courtyard, so how could the original body of the ice-fire holy rune exist here?" Zhuan nodded. Xiao Hei was right. Back then, the rune spirit had clearly said that his original body was in the Hall of Ice and Fire in the inner courtyard. These words should be true. As for this tower that was formed from the fusion of ice and fire energy in the outer courtyard, it was most likely built by someone from the outer courtyard to imitate the Hall of Ice and Fire in the inner courtyard. However, what was the purpose of this tower? The dean also noticed that the gazes of the 10 people behind him were fixed on the 2 towers in the inner courtyard. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he explained, "These 2 towers are the most important buildings in the outer courtyard." As he spoke, the dean's right hand pointed at the tower that was covered with runes and said, "This tower is called the Arcane Tower. It was built by the outer courtyard's chief arcanist, Lord Mu Feng. Its purpose is to nurture outer courtyard geniuses with mental energy talent." Mu Feng. Zhuan's eyes flashed. He was very familiar with the name Mu Feng. Back then, Elder Xuan had mentioned this person to him. It was said that Mu Feng had a clue about the 1,000-fold stone that could increase the success rate of fusing 9 types of earth fire. Moreover, Zhuan's sharp senses noticed that the dean was very respectful towards Mu Feng. When he added the word, Lord, his eyes were filled with admiration. Zhuan knew that this Mu Feng was not simple. It was very possible that he was the arcane heavenly master who had set up the Yuan gathering array in the main city that Little Black had mentioned. If that was really the case, then Mu Feng was indeed amazing. Although Zhuan had never seen how terrifying an arcane heavenly master was, Xiao Hei had a very high evaluation of them. They were far more terrifying than ordinary Emperor Realm experts. After all, an arcane heavenly master was able to create a 7th-grade origin formation that was comparable to a demonic weapon. Without a doubt, even high-level Emperor Realm experts would not dare to provoke an arcane heavenly master. After all, a 7th-grade origin formation was too terrifying. After introducing the arcane tower, the dean pointed at the red and blue tower with his right hand again and said, "This is the outer courtyard's cultivation tower. It contains powerful ice and fire energy. This energy is very mysterious and can temper your meridians, increasing the capacity of your meridians and providing a shortcut for your cultivation." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As soon as the dean said that, the rest of the geniuses behind him immediately looked at the cultivation tower. Among them, other than Zhuan, who had the talent to become an arcanist, the others did not have such talent. Therefore, they were naturally not interested in the arcane tower. However, this cultivation tower actually had the effect of tempering a cultivator's meridians. This point attracted everyone's attention. In a cultivator's cultivation, the dantian was the most important, followed by the meridians. After all, the meridians were the channels that channeled origin energy into the dantian. The meridians of the human body were extremely complicated and were divided into many types. For example, the 8 extraordinary meridians, the 12 meridians, the Ren and Du meridians, and so on. It could be said that the meridians were an important organ for a cultivator's cultivation. However, the meridians were innate. Some people were born with thick meridians that could contain several times more origin energy than a normal person. Naturally, their cultivation speed would be several times faster than a normal person. These people were commonly known as geniuses. Some people were born with small meridians that could even be blocked. They could not contain much origin energy and their cultivation speed would be extremely slow. Some people were even unable to cultivate. These people were trash and were destined to have no fate with the martial path. As for the method of tempering meridians, it was basically unheard of in the outside world. It could even be said that it was very rare. After all, if such a method really existed, then it would be completely possible to create a monstrous genius with a terrifying cultivation speed. But now, this cultivation tower in the outer courtyard actually had the effect of tempering meridians. This could not help but cause the 10 people's expressions to change. They all stared at the cultivation tower with burning gazes. They also finally knew why the students of Excellent Divine Academy were all extraordinary. It was mainly due to the cultivation tower. Dean, there must be a price to enter the cultivation tower, right? Pom Pom, who was carrying a long sword on his back, suddenly asked. The dean nodded and said, "Of course. If you want to enter the cultivation tower to cultivate, then you must pay a corresponding amount of contribution points. Moreover, the cultivation tower has a total of 10 floors. The higher the floor, the better the tempering effect. Of course, the required contribution points will also be higher." How do you obtain contribution points? Yun Zhongyang also opened his mouth and asked. Contribution points, as the name implies, you must make a contribution to the academy in order to obtain the contribution points. In Excellent Divine Academy, there are many ways to obtain contribution points. In the future, you will slowly find out. However, the most mainstream way to obtain contribution points is to accept the academy's missions. After completing the missions, you will be able to obtain contribution points. Hearing the dean's explanation, Zhuowen, Pom Pom, and the rest of the 10 people all nodded their heads. It seemed like contribution points were very important in the academy. Do you know why I called the 10 of you here alone? The dean smiled and asked the 10 people behind him. Zhuowen and the rest naturally shook their heads as they silently cursed in their hearts. Who would be able to guess your thoughts? After all, you are the top 10 freshmen this year. To be able to stand out from tens of thousands of people, you have already proven your talent and ability. I have specially brought you here mainly to give you the top 10 freshman rewards. Now, follow me. I will bring you to receive your rewards. After saying that, the dean waved his sleeves and led them into the Excellent Divine Academy. The Excellent Divine Academy was indeed very large. Within it, there were countless pavilions and terraces. Moreover, the Excellent Divine Academy students that they met along the way were all full of energy and had strong cultivations. When the Excellent Divine Academy students saw the dean bring Zhuowen, Pom Pom, and the rest of the 10 people in, they first revealed astonished expressions before respectfully bowing towards the dean. Zhuowen even noticed that many of the surrounding students were pointing at the 10 of them and whispering to each other, as if they were admiring some rare exotic beast. With regards to the surrounding seniors pointing and whispering, Nguyen also felt a little helpless. However, he did not take it to heart. The dean brought the 10 of them through an ancient corridor, pavilions, and courtyards. Finally, they arrived at a rather large pavilion. This was a study room. On the surrounding walls of the room, there were paintings and calligraphy. In the middle of the room, there was a wooden table made of red sandalwood. On the side of the wooden table, there were rows of books. It looked elegant and unique. Chapter 1003. Contribution Counter. Standing in front of the desk, the 10 of them looked at each other in dismay. They never thought that the dean would give them 2 types of rewards. Dean, can contribution points be used to exchange for spirit treasures, elixirs, and the like? Pom Pom suddenly stood up and asked. Of course. The dean nodded. Then I'll choose contribution points. Pom-Pom calmly said. Since contribution points could be exchanged for spirit treasures and elixirs, and the dean had said that contribution points could be used to enter the cultivation pagoda, it was obvious that contribution points were more flexible than physical objects. Moreover, in Garcia Divine Academy, contribution points would definitely be used everywhere. Thus, Pom-Pom chose to exchange for contribution points. After all, with contribution points, it would undoubtedly be easier to do things in the academy. The dean's eyes revealed a trace of craftiness as he asked, "Are you sure you want to choose contribution points?" Pom-Pom was a little suspicious of the dean's attitude. Her eyes narrowed as she nodded, "I'm sure." The dean nodded and looked at the other 9. "What about the 9 of you? Is it the same as Pom-Pom's choice? Do you also have to choose contribution points?" They weren't stupid and naturally knew that contribution points were more flexible than physical objects. It would be strange if they didn't choose contribution points. Juan felt that the dean's attitude was a little strange. Although he felt that something was wrong, Juan still chose contribution points. After all, contribution points should be the currency of Garcia Divine Academy. In the academy, contribution points were definitely needed everywhere. If one didn't have contribution points at the beginning, it would definitely be difficult to move forward in the academy. But what was the meaning of that crafty look in the dean's eyes? Could it be that behind the contribution points reward, there was some other secret? Since you have all decided, then your rewards will be changed to contribution points. This time, the 1st to 10th place will be rewarded with contribution points from 10,000 to 1,000. First place will be 10,000 and 10th place will be 1,000. Saying that, the dean waved his sleeves and 10 black rays flew out. Then, the 10 black rays were like small snakes that coiled around the right wrist of Juan and the other 9, turning into something like a wrist guard. Juan was shocked. He quickly raised his right hand and found that there was a black wrist guard on his right wrist. In the middle of the wrist guard, there was a light screen about an inch wide. The light screen showed the number 10,000. There's no need to be surprised. What you have in your hands is a contribution counter. This thing records the contribution points you have. The number inside represents the contribution points you have, the dean said unhurriedly. Everyone came back to their senses and nodded. It seemed like this so-called contribution counter meter was a rather important item. It was actually the medium and carrier of contribution points, used to record the number of contribution points. Juan's gaze landed on Emo Lingtian's hand beside him. He saw that the contribution meter in Emo Lingtian's hand displayed a number of 1,000. Clearly, the amount of contribution points awarded by the dean was not unfair. All right, the rewards have already been given to all of you. Next, I will order people to arrange the accommodations for the 500 new students. This jade strip has recorded the geographical location of the Jiaxin Institute. Your accommodations are also clearly marked. Saying this, the dean waved his sleeves again. 10 jade strips flew out and landed in the hands of the 10 students. Also, the Jiaxin Institute has always been a free school. There will not be any restrictions on your freedom, nor will you be forced to learn anything. However, there is one thing you must remember. In the future, you must pay a fixed fee of 20,000 contribution points to the institute every year. If you are unable to reach this amount, you will be expelled. When the dean's words came out, the 10 of them trembled. The dean's words were quite pleasant to hear. He would not restrict their freedom, nor would he force them to learn anything. However, when he said that they would have to pay 20,000 contribution points every year, the 10 of them were speechless. Based on the new student rewards, it would not be easy to obtain these contribution points. However, this dean had opened his mouth like a lion. Every year, they would have to pay 20,000 contribution points. If they were unable to reach this amount, they would be expelled. Wasn't this forcing them to continuously do missions to accumulate contribution points to pay for the school fees? The 10 of them looked at each other. This dean looked kind and amiable, but in reality, he was a cunning old fox. Dean, I would like to ask you about a person. Suddenly, Juan stood up. Oh, who is it? The corner of the dean's mouth rose. Juan clenched his fist and asked excitedly, Is there a girl called Mu Chenxue in the outer court? Mu Chenxue? The dean was startled at first, but soon after, he nodded and continued, yes. This little girl's talent is very strong. Her performance in the outer court is very strong. Then where is she now? Zhuowen's heart was about to jump out. Mu Chenxue was actually in the outer court. 3 months ago, this little girl advanced to the Emperor realm and was promoted to enter the inner court. The dean suddenly said. This sentence was like a bucket of cold water, causing Zhuowen to freeze in place. Is the inner court in the 9 underworld realm? And how can I enter the inner court? Zhuowen frowned and asked in disappointment. The lowest requirement to enter the inner court is the Emperor realm. If you can advance to the Emperor realm in the outer court, then you have the qualifications to enter the inner court. The dean said indifferently. Emperor realm? Zhuowen frowned. He didn't expect that the requirement to enter the inner court was so high. One had to be at least in the Emperor realm to enter? Looks like I won't be able to see Mu Chenxue for a while. Luckily, there are still 2 years before the cold poison acts up. There should still be time. Although he was disappointed, Yuan didn't lose his fighting spirit. Instead, he silently said to himself, all right, you guys can leave this place. You can also walk around the academy and familiarize yourself with the atmosphere. At this point, the dean's eyes flashed with a trace of craftiness. The 10 of them nodded, but in their hearts, they were puzzled. This dean brought them here for no reason, just to give them some reward points and then leave with a few words? This was a little inexplicable. Brother Zhua, let's walk around the Jiaxin Academy and familiarize ourselves with the atmosphere. Mo Lingtian came to Zhuowen's side and smiled. Zhuowen nodded. Just as he was about to leave with Mo Lingtian, a figure suddenly blocked his path. Raising his head, he saw Pamda's sharp gaze staring straight at Chun. What's the matter? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Zhuowen, you're very strong. In the 1000 Beasts Grotto, I was inferior and admitted defeat. However, this is the Jiaxin Academy. With my talent and the Academy's resources, my cultivation and strength will definitely increase by leaps and bounds. When the time comes, I will ask you for some advice. When the time comes, I hope you won't disappoint me. Pamda said, full of fighting spirit. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, don't worry. I definitely won't disappoint you. On the other hand, you shouldn't disappoint me. Pamda's pupils shrank, but he laughed and said, don't worry, next time we fight, you won't be disappointed. After saying that, Pamda turned around and left without any hesitation. Zhuowen nodded as he looked at Palm Tree's sharp back. Palm Tree's martial heart was extremely firm. Although he had been defeated by Zhuowen in the Myriad Beasts Grotto, he didn't have any resentment. Instead, he was even more determined to pursue martial arts. With Pamda's current mentality and aptitude, Zhuowen knew that Pamda's future achievements wouldn't be low. As soon as Pamda left, Zhuowen felt a venomous gaze directed at him. Turning his head, he saw Yun Zhongyang staring at him with an unkind expression, as if he was about to devour him. What? You're not satisfied? Do you think that the punishment of breaking your arms wasn't enough? Zhuowen said indifferently. Yun Zhongyang's eyelids twitched and he coldly said, don't be so smug. Do you think anything can happen in the Jiaxin Academy? You're only in the venerable realm right now, while I'm already a heavenly venerable. I'll definitely become a martial emperor before you. At that time, let's see how you'll be my opponent. After saying that, Yun Zhongyang swaggered off, while Zhuowen sneered. Yun Zhongyang had lost to him twice, so it probably left a shadow in his heart. With his current state of mind, who knew how long it would take for him to advance to the martial emperor realm? Moreover, while Yun Zhongyang was improving, Zhuowen was also improving. When the time came, Yun Zhongyang would probably suffer a crushing defeat at his hands again. Zhuowen didn't pay too much attention to Yun Zhongyang's words. Zhuowen was the type of person who wouldn't offend others unless they offended him. If someone offended him, Zhuowen would definitely use thunderous methods to teach them a lesson. Of course, Yun Zhongyang wasn't the only one looking at him with resentment. Among them, the 5th-ranked Sky Origin also had an extremely unfriendly gaze. In front of the Myriad Beasts Grotto, not only had Zhuowen beaten him and his 3rd brother, but his eldest brother, Yuan Zhao, had also died because of Zhuowen. Their Alcaide sacred dynasty and Zhuoan were already irreconcilable, so how could Sky Origin be nice to Zhuoan? However, Sky Origin didn't say anything. Instead, he revealed a strange smile to Zhuoan and left. Looking at Sky Origin's back, Zhuoan frowned slightly. He had a feeling that Sky Origin was acting strange. As for why he had such a feeling, Zhuoan couldn't put his finger on it. Looks like I have to be careful of Sky Origin and the Yuanxing brothers. Narrowing his eyes, Zhuoan muttered in a low voice. Although Yuanxing and Sky Origin were weaker than him, he was afraid that the two brothers would think of ways to scheme against him. Therefore, he had to be on guard against them. Walking out of the dean's study, there was an extremely large square 100 meters in front of the study. There were many students in the Divine Academy's uniforms standing on the square. These students had their hands crossed in front of their chests as if they were waiting for something. When Zhuoan, Pom Pom, and the other freshmen walked out of the study and arrived at the square, the students who were waiting immediately stood up like cats that had smelled blood. They stared at Zhuoan and the other freshmen with burning eyes, as if they were hunters that had spotted their prey. Zhuoan frowned slightly. These people should be the seniors of the academy, so why were they gathered in the square? Moreover, it seemed like they were waiting for the 10 of them. "Ha, you're finally out. We've been waiting for you for a long time, my dear juniors." Chapter 1004. Snatching Contribution Points. Who are you? We don't seem to know you, do we? Why are you waiting for us? Yun Zhongyang was the first to speak. He stared at the burly man with an unruly gaze. Just now, he had sensed that the burly man's aura was at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm. His cultivation was one level lower than his. With Yun Zhongyang's unruly personality, he naturally could not tolerate a cultivator with a lower cultivation than him speaking to him in such a manner. Of course, Zhuoan was an exception. After all, Zhuoan's combat power was too strong. Even though Yun Zhongyang was arrogant, he had to admit that Zhuoan was indeed stronger than him. But who was this burly man in front of him? He was only at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm, yet he dared to yell at him. He even looked at him as if he did not care about them at all. The burly man chuckled. He did not seem to care about Yun Zhongyang's attitude. Instead, he pointed at the contribution points counter on Yun Zhongyang's right hand and said indifferently, "The 10 of you should be the top 10 freshmen this year. I'm afraid that you have received quite a lot of contribution points as a reward, right? If you don't want to suffer physical pain, contribute your contribution points." As soon as he said this, the 10 freshmen, including Yun Zhongyang, narrowed their eyes. The purpose of these outer yard seniors waiting for them in the square was to snatch the contribution points in their hands. The atmosphere in the square immediately fell into a strange freezing point. Zhuoan, Pom, and the rest of the freshmen did not expect that they would be intercepted by these seniors the moment they walked out of the dean's study. Looking at the burly man's gaze, it was obvious that he already knew that they would be able to obtain contribution points. He had purposely waited for them on this path with the goal of snatching the contribution points in their hands. Zhuoan frowned slightly as he looked at the senior students blocking the way in the plaza. He could not help but recall the craftiness in the dean's eyes in the study. It seemed that the dean had long predicted that they would encounter such a situation. In other words, contribution points could be snatched away? It seemed that the outer yard was not a peaceful place. The law of the jungle was still vividly displayed here. However, there was one thing that was better than the outside world, and that was that they could not kill each other in the academy. At this moment, the dean had already walked out of the study and stood in the shade of a tree in a rather remote area. He silently watched everything that was happening in the square in front of him, and two figures had unknowingly appeared behind him. The two figures were a man and a woman. The man was about 30 years old and had a head full of golden hair. He looked like a mighty lion and had a rough aura. The other woman was very young. She had a graceful figure and was extremely beautiful. She held an ancient zither in her hands. "Meng Shi, Wu Shang, what do you two think?" The dean suddenly asked the two people behind him. The golden-haired Meng Shi looked at Zhuoan's back with a complicated expression. He said, "These 10 people all have excellent talents. This is especially so for Zhuoan." His talent is extraordinarily horrifying. Initially, I thought that this lad would fall in the Qing Xian Empire. I didn't expect him to be so lucky. Even the Qing Emperor couldn't do anything to him. The dean nodded and suddenly said to the beautiful woman beside him, "Don't you want to meet Zhuan?" Moyan Wushang shook his head and said, "Uncle Mangshi forced me to leave the Qing Xian Empire." As a result, Yuan was attacked from both sides. I really don't know how to face him. Mangshi scratched his head and said guiltily, "Wushang, you can't blame me. You can't blame me. If Emperor Qing was really angry, he might have killed us. If Emperor Qing was a first-level martial emperor, we could have fought him together. But Emperor Qing was a second-level martial emperor." Moyan Wushang shook his head and said softly, "Uncle Mangshi, I know what you mean. I don't mean to blame you. It's just that I don't know how to face Zhuan now." The dean nodded and didn't say anything. He looked at the square and said with a smile, "Don't mention it. Wushang, you have been at the peak Heavenly Master realm for a long time. It's time for you to break through to the Emperor realm. Once you succeed, you will be promoted to the inner courtyard like Mu Chenxue." Moyan Wushang nodded. Her cultivation was at the peak Heavenly Master realm. If she succeeded, she would have a high chance of breaking through to the Emperor realm. Now, let's see how these 10 young fellows will deal with the senior students. After all, these 10 young fellows are in the top 10 of this year's freshmen. It's inevitable that they will be proud and arrogant. Letting the senior students teach them a lesson will be good for their future development. As he said that, the dean looked at the square in front of him and observed everything that was happening there with great interest. Mangshi and Moyan Wushang also looked at the square curiously. They also wanted to know the strength of the top 10 freshmen, especially Zhuan. Although Zhuan used the 100 transformation technique to change his appearance, the dean could see through Zhuan's disguise. Therefore, Moyan Wushang and Mangshi knew that this Zhuan was the Zhuan from the Qing Xian Empire. In the square, the confrontation between the top 10 freshmen and the black-faced man attracted the attention of many people. They gathered to watch the show. He Tao is going to blackmail the freshmen again. This year's top 10 freshmen are going to suffer again. What can we do? Although He Tao's cultivation is at the peak Golden Master realm, he already has the battle strength of a Heavenly Master. Last time, he almost entered the Heavenly Master list. He can be regarded as the first person under the Heavenly Master realm. Us seniors don't dare to provoke him. However, this is also under the dean's tacit approval. Every year, we seniors only get this little benefit. However, the quality of this year's freshman is much better than the previous one. There are actually 2 early-stage Heavenly Masters. One of them seems to be a sword cultivator. Discussions sounded like firecrackers in the surroundings. Many seniors stared at the top 10 freshmen mockingly. "Brother Zhua, these seniors' cultivation is not very strong. How can they hold their heads high and provoke us?" Mo Ling Tian said with a frown. Zhuan also felt a little strange. This group of seniors who gathered were mostly Golden Masters and Supremes. There were no Heavenly Masters. However, among the 10 freshmen, there were 2 early-stage Heavenly Masters. Moreover, other than Zhuan and Mo Ling Tian, the rest were all Golden Masters. He didn't know where these seniors got their confidence from. They thought that they could defeat them. He Tao slowly stepped forward. He pointed at Yun Zhongyang and said, "Looking at you, you seem to be very unhappy about contributing contribution points. Could it be that you want to reject my suggestion?" Yun Zhongyang's gaze was extremely cold. He had been crushed by Zhuan many times during the test. It had already made his heart burn with anger. This dark-faced senior in front of him, who was only at the peak of Golden Venerable, actually dared to provoke him. With Yun Zhongyang's personality, how could he tolerate this? "I think you're courting death." With a cold snort, Yun Zhongyang bent his knees and arched his waist. Then he suddenly shot out like a cannonball. He rapidly shot towards He Tao. The terrifying force almost formed a ring-shaped airwave in the air. "Yo, you have quite a character. However, let me, your senior, teach you a good lesson," He Tao said mockingly. His eyes emitted a sharp light. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying force burst out. At this moment, It was as if a huge mountain had suddenly appeared on top of He Tao, causing the pressure around him to increase tremendously. The moment He Tao's aura burst out, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He Tao's aura was terrifying. It had actually far surpassed the average peak of Golden Venerable. Even the average beginner Heavenly Venerable might not necessarily be able to match He Tao's powerful aura. This He Tao is not simple, Zhuowen muttered to himself. The rest of the freshmen also revealed solemn expressions. Obviously, they had all noticed that He Tao was not ordinary. Blue Whale Diving Sea. Yun Zhongyang's gaze was cold. His force burst out and turned into a vast sea. On the surface of the sea, a huge blue whale rushed out of the sea and dived down. It swooped down towards He Tao, intending to crush him into powder. Ha! Come on, tyrannical king's fist. He Tao laughed and punched out fiercely. Countless strong winds swept out, causing his robe and long hair to flutter. In an instant, his fist landed on the huge blue whale in the sky. Boom! The sound of an explosion suddenly resounded. Terrifying airwaves spread out, causing the entire square to tremble. Then a scene that shocked Zhuowen happened. Yun Zhongyang's blue whale diving sea was actually stopped by He Tao's tyrannical king's fist. It was completely unable to move forward. It was as if the tyrannical king's fist was like a huge mountain in front of the huge blue whale. It was unable to move at all. Break, break, break. He Tao roared furiously. Punch after punch landed on the blue whale. The wind from his punches whistled and formed a hurricane. The fierce fist aura cracked the ground. A terrifying fist intent seemed to pierce the sky and explode the firmament. Fist intent. Looking at He Tao's unstoppable fist aura, one could tell at a glance that He Tao had mastered a powerful fist intent. Moreover, it should be a fist intent that had reached the peak of perfection. It was very powerful and domineering. Boom, boom, boom. He Tao continuously punched out dozens of times. The terrifying fist intent was monstrous. Countless fist shadows lingered in the air. Those were the traces left behind by the powerful fist aura. Last punch, tyrannical king's fist. He Tao stomped his feet and instantly appeared above the blue whale. He stepped on the head of the blue whale and punched down fiercely. As the punch landed, it was as if the sky and earth were collapsing. Bang! The blue whale wailed and instantly turned into blue powder. This punch had directly destroyed Yun Zhongyang's blue whale diving sea. Thump, thump, thump. Yun Zhongyang's eyes were filled with disbelief. He retreated dozens of steps and was even a little confused. What's wrong with the senior? He's only a golden exalt. How can his combat strength be so terrifying? It had actually broken through his blue whale submerged sea with ease. Chapter 1005. Poor Yun Zhongyang. As soon as he said that, the other seniors who had gathered around burst into laughter. They looked at Yun Zhongyang with ridicule. Yun Zhongyang's eyes were extremely gloomy, but he was secretly shocked by He Tao's combat strength. He Tao was only at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm, so why was his combat strength so terrifying? Could it be that the combat strength of the seniors in the outer yard far exceeded their cultivation? My dear junior brother, I don't want to make things difficult for you. Hand over your contribution points. He Tao spread his hands and said to Yun Zhongyang mockingly, "You want my contribution points? I don't think you have what it takes." Yun Zhongyang's eyes were extremely cold. He took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of He Tao. A blue trident appeared in his hand. It was the sea god's halberd. Sea god's sacrifice. Yun Zhongyang formed a seal with his hands. Suddenly, the sea around Yun Zhongyang surged with huge waves. Then, the sea god's halberd turned into the spine of the sea god. With the sea as his flesh, a huge phantom of the sea god was formed. Roar! Sea god! Yun Zhongyang roared. The phantom of the sea god took a step forward and rushed towards He Tao. Its giant foot was like a pillar that could hold up the sky. It did not hesitate to step on He Tao's head. It wanted to completely crush He Tao to death. He Tao's eyes flashed with a hint of excitement. He laughed loudly and threw out another punch. This punch seemed to be able to pierce through the sky, like a meteor streaking across the starry sky. Big Dipper meteor. A faint voice sounded. Then, the meteor-like fist energy cut through the void and fell. In an instant, countless meteors fell from the void and smashed heavily on the phantom of the sea god. The meteor shower contained extremely terrifying fist energy. The power of this punch was much stronger than He Tao's tyrannical king's fist. Under the meteor-like fist energy, the phantom of the sea god was completely annihilated and turned into nothingness. Puchi. Yun Zhongyang spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow as he retreated. He Tao, on the other hand, did not show any mercy. Like a ghost, he instantly appeared in front of Yun Zhongyang and viciously stomped down on him. Rumble. Yun Zhongyang was caught off guard. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest before his back made intimate contact with the ground. The terrifying force almost caused him to pass out. The other 9 freshmen looked on in shock. Yun Zhongyang was ranked 3rd among the freshmen, and his cultivation level was at the early stage of the heavenly venerable realm. Yet, he was being trampled by He Tao just like that, especially when He Tao used the celestial meteor. Its power was terrifying. Coupled with He Tao's powerful fist intent, he was able to shatter Yun Zhongyang's sea god's sacrifice with a single punch. This He Tao's combat strength was even more terrifying than the average Empyrean martial artist. They didn't think that the older students of the Divine Academy would be so formidable. They had just entered and they had already encountered such a tough opponent. My dear junior brother, if you hadn't been so stubborn in the beginning, you wouldn't have had to suffer. Now that you've already lost to me, I'll gladly accept your contribution points. He Tao smiled as he patted Yun Zhongyang's cheek. He then extended his right hand, which was also wearing a technical contribution sheet. He Tao matched his technical contribution sheet with Yun Zhongyang's technical contribution sheet. Instantly, the 8,000 points on Yun Zhongyang's technical contribution sheet decreased rapidly until it finally reached 0. Zhuowen and the others were astonished when they saw this. It seemed that contribution points could be transferred like this. No wonder He Tao wanted to snatch their contribution points. Only 8,000 points? You're only ranked 3rd among the freshmen? He Tao frowned when he saw that his contribution points had increased by 8,000 points. He was naturally very clear about the rewards for new students. From the 1st to the 10th place, the rewards were respectively 10,000 to 1,000 points. The reward for the 3rd place was 8,000 points. However, there were only 2 early-stage Empyrean geniuses among the top 10 freshmen this year. He thought that Yun Zhongyang would have at least 9,000 or 10,000 points. He didn't expect him to only have 8,000 points. Then you should be ranked 1st among the freshmen this year, right? I wonder which little fellow is ranked 2nd. After He Tao pointed at Palm Tree, his gaze immediately fell on Yuan Kong and Shichua. Aside from Palm Tree and Yun Zhongyang, these 2 had the highest cultivation. They were both at the peak of Golden Venerable. He thought that the 2nd place would be one of them. Palm Tree shook her head faintly. You misunderstood? I'm only ranked 2nd among the freshmen. He Tao and the others in the square were stunned when they heard Palm Tree's words. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Among the top 10 freshmen, there were only 2 early-stage Empyrean geniuses. Neither of them was ranked 1st among the freshmen. They were ranked 2nd and 3rd. Who was ranked 1st? They couldn't think of anyone among the top 10 freshmen who could be more abnormally powerful than Palm Tree and Yun Zhongyang. Of course, most of their attention was on Shichua and Yuan Kong. Their auras at the peak of the Golden Venerable realm were naturally the closest to that of a Heavenly Venerable. Moreover, it was possible that a Golden Venerable could surpass an early-stage Heavenly Venerable genius among the freshmen. If there really was such a monstrous genius among this batch of freshmen, it wouldn't take more than a few years for such a genius to rise up in the outer court. Of course, Zhuowen and Mo Lingtian, the 2 supreme-grade brats, were completely ignored by He Tao and the other seniors. After all, their cultivations were too insignificant among the top 10 freshmen. Looks like one of you 2 should be ranked 1st among the freshmen this time. He Tao was in high spirits as he stepped on Yun Zhongyang's body. His sharp gaze immediately landed on Yuan Kong and Shichua. Their expressions changed slightly as they shook their heads. He Tao's strength was too terrifying. Even Yun Zhongyang had been beaten up so badly by him. They didn't want to be the first to stand out. If it's not the two of you, could it be one of those three? He Tao's gaze was cold as he pointed at Blue Smoke, Fin Ji, and Yuan Tong. However, the three of them quickly shook their heads. They didn't want to go up against a freak like He Tao. At this moment, He Tao's expression was a little ugly. Even the last three Golden Supreme Grade freshmen weren't ranked first among the freshmen this time. Could it be that the two remaining Supreme Grade brats were ranked first among the freshmen? Are you guys messing with me? None of the 8 of you are ranked first among the freshmen. Could it be that you want to tell me that the 2 Supreme Grade brats are ranked first among the freshmen? He Tao snorted coldly. He didn't believe that a mere Supreme Grade brat could be ranked first among the freshmen this time. It was simply inconceivable. A Golden Supreme Grade brat challenging a Heavenly Venerable was already considered a monstrous genius, but a Supreme Grade brat challenging a Heavenly Venerable was truly unbelievable. Moreover, this was a freshman who hadn't tempered his meridians in the cultivation tower. If it was the Supreme Grade seniors in the outer court who had cultivated in the cultivation tower for a period of time, they might be able to challenge an ordinary Heavenly Venerable. However, he didn't believe that a freshman who hadn't cultivated in the cultivation tower could be such a monstrous genius. Let me go. I'll tell you who's ranked first among the freshmen. At this moment, a weak voice came from under He Tao's foot. It was Yun Zhongyang's voice. He Tao nodded and released his foot. He said to Yun Zhongyang, "Tell me honestly, who's ranked first among the freshmen? Is it that guy with a sword on his back?" As he spoke, He Tao casually pointed at Yun Zhongyang, causing the latter to frown slightly. A sharp glint flashed across his eyes. At this moment, Yun Zhongyang was in an extremely sorry state. There was a trace of hatred in his eyes as he looked at He Tao, but he didn't show it. After that, Yun Zhongyang's cold gaze landed on Jun. He grinned and pointed at Jun, saying, "This guy is ranked first among the freshmen." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As soon as Zhuowen's words came out, everyone's gazes instantly converged on him. When the seniors in the square cast their gazes on Jun, the entire square instantly fell silent. This was because the so-called ranked first among the freshmen was actually the one with the weakest cultivation among the 10 freshmen. His cultivation was only at the late-stage Supreme Being realm. He Tao's gaze followed Yun Zhongyang's finger and landed on Jun. When he sensed the late-stage Supreme Being realm aura from Zhuowen's body, he was silent for a moment. Then he stepped on Yun Zhongyang again. Plop. Before Yun Zhongyang could even react, He Tao stepped on him again, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Are you fucking kidding me? A mere late-stage Supreme Being realm cultivator is ranked first among the freshmen? I think you're just messing with me. As He Tao spoke, he ruthlessly stepped on Yun Zhongyang's body with his right foot. Perhaps because he was extremely displeased, He Tao even stepped on Yun Zhongyang's face, causing him to be covered in dirt. Poor Yun Zhongyang. He had only spoken the truth, but he had angered He Tao out of humiliation, causing him to suffer such an unexpected calamity. The other 9 freshmen looked at He Tao and Yun Zhongyang strangely. They couldn't help but mourn for Yun Zhongyang in their hearts. Everything I said was the truth. Jun is ranked first among the freshmen. Yun Zhongyang hurriedly explained. Unfortunately, this only caused He Tao to step on him even more fiercely. This brat was lying to him, but he actually didn't change his words. He Tao was so angry that he stepped on him even more fiercely. After 10 breaths, He Tao finally stopped. Yun Zhongyang's face was almost unrecognizable. His entire body had turned into a tragic pig's head. When He Tao stepped on Yun Zhongyang, he deliberately controlled his strength. He didn't injure Yun Zhongyang's internal organs. These were only superficial wounds, but they didn't look good. Do you really think I'm a 3-year-old child? Now you should tell the truth, right? He Tao said casually. Yun Zhongyang, on the other hand, wanted to cry but had no tears. All he did was speak the truth. How did he end up like this? He stammered, "If you don't believe me, you can go and take a look at Zhuo Wen's technical contribution sheet. It shows 10,000. He Tao was stunned. He nodded and his sharp gaze landed on Zhuan. Let me see your contribution list. Zhuan's eyes narrowed. He slowly stepped forward and said indifferently, there's no need to look. I'm ranked first among the freshmen. It's really you? Heitao's gaze focused. He immediately noticed that none of the other freshmen refuted him. In other words, this brat really was ranked first among the freshmen. Chapter 1006. Against Heitao at the same time, Zhuan also flashed the contribution points table in his hand. He knew that it would be useless even if he denied it. After all, he was indeed the top new student. When Heitao and the other seniors saw the number on the contribution points table on Zhuan's wrist, they all fell silent for a moment before bursting into an uproar. The top new student is actually this kid with the lowest cultivation? Heitao's eyes narrowed as he muttered in a low voice. Now you believe that I didn't lie to you, right? Hurry up and let me go. Yun Zhongyang was very sullen at this moment and said in a muffled voice. Heitao shrugged and said with a fake smile, Junior, I'm really sorry. It was all a misunderstanding just now. This is none of your business. You can leave now. Yun Zhongyang slowly got up. At this moment, his face was too horrible to look at. Using a pig's head to describe it was more appropriate. Yun Zhongyang glanced hatefully at Heitao and left the square dejectedly. His contribution points had been snatched away by Heitao, so naturally, no one would stop him. Junior, you're quite lucky to be the top new student. How about this? Senior won't make things difficult for you. As long as you give me 9,900 contribution points, I'll let you go. How about it? Heitao came in front of Zhuan and said with a smile. The corners of Zhuan's mouth held a smile as he said, Senior, this Zhu doesn't dare to agree to your request. These contribution points are what we deserve after risking our lives. Is it really okay for you to snatch them away like this? Heitao narrowed his eyes and the smile on his face faded. He said indifferently, It seems that Junior intends to refuse Senior's kindness? As he said that, Heitao's face began to turn cold. The aura on his body surged out and formed countless astral winds on the surface of his body. Obviously, Heitao intended to snatch the contribution points by force. Heitao, I'll give you the contribution points of the top new student and leave the remaining 8 to us. How about it? The moment Heitao's aura surged, another 8 figures walked out from the crowd in the square. These 8 people had strong auras and their cultivation levels were at the peak of the Golden Venerate realm. They could be considered as one of the stronger seniors in the square. As soon as these 8 people appeared, the faces of many older students in the square who were ready to make trouble immediately fell. They are from the Emperor Pavilion. Isn't the person in the lead Du Tao from the Emperor Pavilion? He's not someone to be trifled with. It's actually Du Tao. This Du Tao's status in the Emperor Pavilion isn't low. Although his battle prowess is inferior to Heitao's, with the Emperor Pavilion, even Heitao wouldn't dare to not give Du Tao face, right? The older students in the square looked at these 8 people with fear in their eyes. It was obvious that these 8 people had an extraordinary background. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to intimidate the other restless older students. Du Tao? I really didn't expect that your rich and overbearing Emperor Pavilion would also join in on the fun. Heitao frowned slightly and said with some displeasure. Du Tao smiled indifferently and said, This isn't the Emperor Pavilion's decision. The 8 of us feel that we don't have enough contribution points to spend and want to earn some extra money. Hearing this, Heitao nodded and said with some fear, Since that's the case, I'll leave these 8 people to you. I'll take the first place among the new students. After he finished speaking, Heitao stomped his foot, and a terrifying energy soared. Then, a strong fist intent surged out, and he threw a punch at Zhuan, as if he wanted to destroy Zhuan with a single punch. This Heitao wasn't simple. Someone who could easily defeat Yun Zhongyang wasn't a simple character. Therefore, Yun wouldn't underestimate him. With a flip of his right hand, a blood spear appeared in his hand. Then he swung the blood spear and a profound spear intent burst out, forming countless ice crystals. Boom! Heitao's fist landed on the ice crystals. When he felt the intent realm within the ice crystals, His eyes narrowed and he said, "Spear intent. I didn't expect you to have grasped the intent realm. No wonder you could obtain the first place among the new students. You're really unique. But your cultivation is too weak. Break for me." After saying that, He Tao stomped his foot and his fist intent became even more terrifying. With a punch, countless palm prints appeared, dazzling and dazzling. Gotcha! As expected, Zhuowen's spear intent couldn't block He Tao's fist intent and instantly shattered. He Tao's fist intent was like a rainbow piercing through the sun, smashing toward Zhuowen's chest. The moment He Tao made his move, Du Tao led the other 7 members of the Emperor Pavilion and surrounded the 8 top 10 freshmen, including Pom Pom and Mo Lingtian. "If you don't want to suffer, hand over your contribution points quickly." Du Tao looked down at Pom Pom's 8 and said indifferently. Pom Pom narrowed his eyes and didn't say anything. He stomped his foot and unsheathed the long sword on his back with his right hand. Countless sword chi burst out and Pom Pom was like a sharp sword that had just been unsheathed, instantly arriving in front of Du Tao. "Sword slash art." A cold and sharp voice rang out. Palm Master straightened his right palm and a sharp sword pierced through space, slashing out horizontally. Immediately, a terrifying sword chi burst out, transforming into a crescent-shaped sword blade that shot towards Du Tao's chest, wanting to slash him to death at the waist. Pom Pom Pom's action directly showed his answer. If he wanted contribution points, he could only fight. "Seems like you want to do things the hard way." Du Tao coldly snorted. With a flick of his finger, he took out a halberd from his spirit ring and raised it high above his head. Then he suddenly smashed it down. An earth-shattering power gushed out and heavily smashed onto the crescent-shaped sword light, directly annihilating the sword light. Subsequently, Du Tao's eyes were cold as he held the halberd and instantly arrived in front of Pom Pom. He flicked the halberd with both hands and it turned into halberd shadows that covered the sky, sealing Pom Pom from all directions. While Du Tao and Palm Tree were fighting, Du Tao's 7 subordinates were already fighting with Mo Lingtian, Shike, and the other freshmen. Countless elemental energy forces swirled in the air, blossoming into multicolored balls of light above the plaza. At this moment, He Tao's fist was already closing in on Zhuan. It was overbearing and wanted to completely destroy Zhuan. "Azura blood spear," Zhuan said indifferently. He raised his blood spear and a huge sea of blood gushed out from the void. The boundless sea of blood blocked He Tao's fist intent in front of Zhuan. General momentum of heaven and earth? With his fist intent blocked, He Tao finally revealed a trace of surprise in his eyes. The young man before him, who was only at the Supreme Being realm, was truly extraordinary. He had actually comprehended the momentum of the world. Taking a few steps back, He Tao's gaze turned serious as he said, "Your combat strength is pretty good. It seems like you didn't get first place by luck. However, if that's all you've got, I think you should hand over your contribution points as soon as possible. I haven't gone all out yet." It's more appropriate for me to say those words because I haven't gone all out either. Zhuan lowered his head and said indifferently. He Tao's eyes narrowed, but he laughed out loud and said, "Good. Since that's the case, I won't hold back." Saying that, He Tao stomped his foot and punched out. Suddenly, countless astral winds were stirred up, and a domineering might gushed out from his fist. It was as if the one who punched out at this moment was an overlord who looked down on the world. Tyrant King's fist. The fist intent, along with the fist aura, set off countless whirlwinds and arrived in front of Zhuan in an instant. Zhuan didn't dare to be careless and immediately formed 4 heads and 8 arms. He formed 8 spear auras and formed 8 seas of blood that instantly entangled the Tyrant King's fist, preventing it from exerting its power. What a strange secret technique. It can actually form 4 heads and 8 arms? He Tao frowned. He was a little surprised by Zhuowen's current appearance, but he didn't think too much about it. He stomped his foot and punched out again. This time, his fist was like a meteor that tore through the void and fell from the sky, bringing with it a meteor shower. Celestial meteor. This move was very terrifying. Zhuan had been defeated by this move just now, so He Tao knew that as long as he used this move, no matter how strong he was, Zhuan would be defeated without any chance of winning. Boom, boom, boom. Countless meteors fell and smashed into the 8 seas of blood. The terrifying fist aura exploded in the meteor shower like countless bombs exploding. Then, the 8 seas of blood that stretched as far as the eye could see all collapsed under this meteor shower. As the seas of blood collapsed, Zhuowen's figure was exposed. At this moment, He Tao's celestial meteor had completely locked onto Zhuowen's aura and swept over from all directions, sealing off all paths of retreat for Zhuowen. Looking at the countless meteors around him, Zhuowen's gaze was exceptionally calm. He slowly withdrew his 4-headed and 8-armed form, and a terrifying demonic aura gushed out from his body. At this moment, it was as if a demon had awakened in Zhuowen's body. First stage of bedevilment. Boom! Boundless blood qi gushed out from Zhuowen's body. At that moment, Zhuowen's eyes were dyed red, and his black hair was dyed red. Demonic qi gushed out, making Zhuowen look like both a god and a demon. It was as if he was a demon from hell. Mo Sha. Zhuowen waved his right hand and the blood spear in his hand floated in front of him. Then, it split into 10 blood spears and revolved around Zhuowen's body. These 10 blood spears began to rotate and formed a blood-colored defense around Zhuowen's body. Boom, boom, boom. Countless meteors descended and blasted into the blood-colored defense. The dazzling starlight almost drowned Zhuowen's figure and a series of explosions resounded in response. He Tao floated in the air above the starlight, looking down at Zhuowen's figure that was submerged in the starlight. He had a feeling that Zhuowen, who had turned into a red-haired, red-eyed Zhuowen, was much stronger than before. Boom! Suddenly, a blood pillar shot up from the countless starlight below. Then, the terrifying starlight was completely annihilated by the blood pillar. What? The celestial meteor was broken? He Tao's pupils shrank and he retreated dozens of steps. He looked at the blood pillar that shot up to the sky and the starlight fist aura that was being annihilated by it. Thump, 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 thump. In the blood pillar, a young man with red hair and red eyes slowly walked out. His body was surrounded by 10 blood spears. When the young man finally stepped out of the blood pillar, he slowly raised his head and stared at He Tao with his scarlet eyes, causing the latter's heart to palpitate. Chapter 1007. Snatch bang, bang, bang. Several collisions rang out, followed by a series of muffled groans. Shichue, Yuan Kong, Blue Smoke, Fenji, Yuan Tong, Huang Xian and Mo Lingtian spat out blood at the same time as they flew back. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 7 members of the Emperor Pavilion arrived in front of their defeated opponents and forcefully snatched their contribution points. The battle between Palmdeva and Du Tao had clearly reached its climax. Countless halberd images and sword auras intertwined in the air as the sound of metal clashing continuously rang out. When the halberd images and sword auras reached their peak, they finally turned into a terrifying explosion of light. A muffled groan resounded from the exploding ball of light. Then, a figure flew out from the ball of light. When everyone's gazes finally converged on the figure, an expression of, as expected, appeared on their faces. That was because the figure that flew out was the second-ranked student, Palmdeva. At this moment, Palmdeva's hair was disheveled and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. His breathing was hurried as he gasped for breath. His right hand that was holding onto the sword was slightly trembling as blood flowed out from his palm. He was in an extremely sorry state. Swoosh! A figure in his right hand smashed down from the explosion of light and smashed onto the ground. Terrifying energy spread out as a ring-shaped airwave was formed. Du Tao slowly stood up with the halberd in his hand as he indifferently stared at Palmdeva and said, "Hand over your contribution points. Although your cultivation is 1 level higher than mine and you're a sword cultivator that focuses on attacking, it's a pity that you're just a new student that has just entered the outer court. You, who have not undergone the baptism of the cultivation tower, are actually very weak. No matter how high your cultivation is, it's useless." As he spoke, Du Tao walked in front of Palmdeva and spread out his right hand as his gaze was filled with ridicule. Cultivation tower? Palmdeva, will definitely take back everything that happened today. Palm Dave's gaze was filled with unwillingness. However, it was useless no matter how unwilling he was. Although Du Tao's cultivation was lower than his, the total amount of yuan power in his body far exceeded his. The power that he could unleash was definitely several times that of an initial heavenly sovereign. The reason why the origin energy in Du Tao's body was so surging was very likely because he had tempered his meridians in the cultivation pagoda for a long time, allowing his body to contain several times more origin energy than an ordinary person, thus increasing his combat strength by tens of times. After she finished speaking, Palm Master handed over all her contribution points to Du Tao and left the square. Du Tao narrowed his eyes with a tinge of fear. This palm tree's talent was definitely strong enough. If it wasn't for the fact that he was a new student and had never cultivated in the cultivation tower, Du Tao wouldn't be a match for him. Although Du Tao was wary of Palm Tree's ruthless words, he didn't take it to heart. Palm Tree's 9,000 contribution points had been taken by him at the start. His starting point would definitely be slower than ordinary martial artists. And with these 9,000 contribution points, he could stay in the cultivation pagoda for a period of time. At that time, his cultivation could also advance to the Empyrean realm. Even if Pom Pom's meridians were tempered by the cultivation pagoda and her combat strength increased, Du Tao didn't fear her. After Palm Tree left, other than Mo Ling Tian, the other 6 of the 7 new students also left the plaza with bad luck. Boom! Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura came from not too far away, attracting the attention of many people in the plaza. Even Du Tao and the other 8 people from the Emperor Pavilion cast their gazes over. Shortly after, everyone saw that in the battle between Zhuan and He Tao had once again used the Heaven Meteor Shower. Countless meteor-like fist energies surged out and enveloped Zhuan from all directions. He Tao actually used the Heaven Meteor Shower. It seems like this Supreme Being new student is indeed extraordinary. But no matter how extraordinary he is, I'm afraid that he'll be seriously injured under the might of the Heaven Meteor Shower. This new student is going to suffer a great loss this time. Looking at the terrifying meteor-like fist energies, everyone was startled at first, but soon after, a mocking expression appeared on their faces. They knew that Zhuowen's fate would be very tragic under the Heaven Meteor Shower. This new student is pretty amazing to be able to force He Tao to use the Heaven Meteor Shower. Du Tao also stared at the countless meteor-like fist energies with a trace of caution in his eyes. He Tao was slightly stronger than him, and even he would be in a sorry state when facing the Heaven Meteor Shower, let alone this new student who was only at the Supreme Being realm. Boom! However, the Heaven Meteor Shower only lasted for a brief moment before a pillar of blood soared into the sky. Soon after, demonic aura surged out and the endless meteor-like fist energies crumbled inch by inch. A young man with blood-red hair and blood-red eyes stepped out of the void with 10 blood spears revolving around his body. He stared coldly at He Tao, causing the latter to involuntarily take a few steps back with an ugly expression on his face. The Heaven Meteor Shower was broken. How did this young man do it? Many older students in the plaza narrowed their eyes as they looked at Zhuan, who was shrouded in a bloody aura. What a terrifying demonic aura! Could this new student be a demonic cultivator? There was a hint of bewilderment in Du Tao's eyes. Devil cultivators were much stronger than sword cultivators. This was an anomaly among cultivators. Once they succeeded in their cultivation, the battle prowess they could unleash was extremely terrifying. He Tao's expression was extremely grave. It seemed like he had underestimated this young man. No wonder this young man was able to obtain the first place among the new students. It wasn't a fluke, but a true achievement. Kill! Zhuan stepped out with his blood-red hair fluttering in the wind. Along with the 10 blood spears around him, he instantly rushed towards He Tao. His bloody aura soared into the sky, forming a terrifying blood cloud in the sky. He Tao's eyes flickered. He wasn't afraid of Zhuowen at all. He blasted out a punch. The terrifying fist chi once again transformed into a monstrous meteor that rumbled toward Zhuowen. He wanted to completely crush Zhuowen. The same move doesn't have any effect on me. Zhuowen's indifferent voice sounded. He then waved his right hand, and the 10 blood spears suddenly swept out. One after another, they fell from the sky and heavily smashed in front of Heitao. Heitao's expression changed slightly, and the momentum of his fists changed. Suddenly, the countless meteor showers above him turned into a powerful meteor shower curtain, trying to block the 10 blood spears. Boom, boom, boom. The first blood spear smashed into the meteor shower curtain, and a terrifying force poured out, causing the meteor shower curtain to tremble violently. However, the meteor shower curtain's defense wasn't bad, and it didn't show any signs of shattering. The second spear, the third spear, until the 9th spear, the force was getting stronger and stronger. The meteor shower curtain also began to tremble violently, and faintly visible cracks appeared on its surface. The 10th spear, break for me, Zhuan shouted in a low voice. When the 10th blood spear finally smashed into the meteor shower curtain, the meteor shower curtain finally trembled violently and completely shattered into countless stars. Puchi. Heitao's expression changed. He felt a terrifying force spread out and heavily smashed into his chest. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood and was forced to retreat 100 meters. He barely managed to stop himself as he stared at Zhuan in front of him with dread. Silence. At this moment, the square became extremely quiet. Many of the seniors in the square knew how terrifying Heitao's combat strength was. After all, Yun Zhongyang, who was at the initial stage of the heavenly venerable realm, was easily defeated by Heitao. Originally, everyone thought that the battle between Heitao and Zhuo Wen would be a battle without any suspense. However, the outcome before them had greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. Heitao was defeated, and thoroughly defeated. Du Tao frowned. He didn't expect Heitao to be defeated. Was this venerable realm freshman in front of him that strong? Senior, do you still want my contribution points? Zhuan took a step forward and instantly arrived 10 meters in front of Heitao. His scarlet eyes stared at Heitao, causing the latter to feel uncomfortable. Forcing a bitter smile, Heitao shook his head and said, "Junior, you're very strong, and even this senior admits defeat. I don't want these contribution points. You can keep them for yourself. I'll take my leave first." Just as Heitao was about to leave, Yun took a step forward and blocked Heitao's path. Heitao's expression froze. "Junior, what is the meaning of this?" Heitao asked helplessly. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth rose slightly and said, "Senior, don't you think it's inappropriate for you to leave like this? Senior seems to have a lot of contribution points on you. Why don't you share some with me? Just treat it as a greeting gift from me." As soon as these words came out, Heitao's expression turned extremely ugly. This Zhuan was giving him a taste of his own medicine. He actually wanted to rob him of his contribution points. "What? Senior, do you think this junior's suggestion is inappropriate?" As Zhuan spoke, the demonic intent on his body became even more terrifying. The 10 blood spears all pointed at Heitao, causing Heitao's expression to turn extremely dark. Junior brother is right. It was senior brother who was rude just now. Now that the 10 blood spears were pointed at him, Heitao had no choice but to submit. Although the academy didn't allow killing, there was no rule against crippling someone. If this Zhuan suddenly took things too hard and crippled him, wouldn't he be done for? Seeing Heitao extend his right hand, Zhuan also extended his right hand and collected all of Heitao's contribution points. Looking at the contribution points, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of pleasant surprise. This was because his contribution points had increased from 10,000 to 40,000. In other words, Heitao actually had 30,000 contribution points on him. Heitao's wealth wasn't small at all. "Senior, thank you for your gift." Zhuan nodded and waved his right hand. The 10 blood spears that were surrounding Heitao returned to Zhuowen's side. Heitao let out a light sigh, his heart filled with helplessness. He originally came here to rob the freshmen of their contribution points, but he didn't expect that he would be the one to lose his contribution points because he was inferior. A dignified senior's contribution points were stolen by a freshman. This seemed to be the first time in the academy's history. "Junior, senior has some matters to attend to, so I won't stay any longer. Goodbye." After saying this, Heitao immediately fled. A dignified senior's contribution points had been stolen by a freshman. He Tao really didn't have the face to stay any longer. Chapter 1008. Suppressing Du Tao's. After He Tao left, Yun took a step forward and arrived at Mo Lingtian's side. "Brother Mo, are you all right?" Looking at the pale Mo Lingtian, Yun asked with concern. Mo Lingtian shook his head and smiled bitterly at Yun. "Brother Zhua, your strength has truly exceeded my expectations. Even He Tao was forced to flee by you." Yun shook his head and looked at the contribution sheet on Mo Lingtian's wrist. He asked coldly, "Have your contribution points been stolen?" Mo Lingtian was startled at first, but soon after he said bitterly, "It's only 1,000 contribution points. It's not a big loss." 1,000 isn't a small number. Yun muttered. His sharp gaze passed through the crowd and landed on Du Tao's group of 8. He said in a clear voice, "The 8 of you should consciously hand over your contribution points." As soon as these words were spoken, the entire square immediately became silent. The gazes of all the senior students converged on Zhuowen, and there was a trace of a strange expression in their eyes. After snatching He Tao, this kid still didn't give up and planned to snatch the contribution points from Du Tao's group of 8? Although Du Tao's strength was weaker than He Tao's, it wasn't by much. He Tao was only one person, while Du Tao had 8 people. If the 8 of them joined forces, He Tao would have to flee in a sorry state. More importantly, Du Tao was a member of the Emperor Pavilion, one of the most powerful factions in the outer court. His background was much more powerful than He Tao's. As long as one knew Du Tao's background, they wouldn't casually provoke such a character. However, this kid, who had just entered the outer court not long ago, defeated He Tao in a thunderous manner and snatched away He Tao's contribution points. Now, he even planned to snatch the contribution points from Du Tao's group of 8. Arrogant. This was everyone's first thought and evaluation of Zhu. Du Tao and the others, who were about to leave the square, stopped in their tracks. After witnessing Zhuowen defeat He Tao, Du Tao knew that this new student, who was only at the Supreme Being realm, was a tough nut to crack. Therefore, he didn't want to cause trouble for himself. After all, they had already obtained the contribution points of 8 new students. The harvest this time was already considered pretty good. There was no need to stir up trouble as that would not benefit them at all. But now, they originally didn't want to provoke this new student, but this new student was actually arrogant enough to provoke them. Moreover, he even wanted them to voluntarily hand over their contribution points. Could it be that this kid's brain was fried? What did you just say? You want us to voluntarily hand over our contribution points? Du Tao looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at an idiot and said coldly. Zhuowen stood up straight and nodded in a serious manner. Am I wrong? If you don't hand over your contribution points, you know the consequences. Du Tao's eyes narrowed dangerously as he said coldly, "It seems that after defeating He Tao, you're very confident in your strength. You even dare to say such words to court death. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you right now. I'm asking you, are you going to hand over your contribution points or not?" Zhuowen said impatiently. Du Tao's face stiffened and immediately revealed a look of anger. This kid is too arrogant. He even showed such an impatient attitude when speaking to me. Is he looking down on me? I originally planned to let you go, but since you took the initiative to provoke me, I won't be polite and will take your contribution points. After saying that, Du Tao stomped his foot and a terrifying aura burst out. The other 7 people beside him also released their auras and stared at Zhuowen with unkind eyes. Du Tao's cultivation was the same as He Tao's, at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm. The 7 people beside him weren't weak either. They were all at the late-stage Golden Venerable Realm and their auras were extremely terrifying. Mo Lingtian looked a little worried. He quickly pulled Zhuowen and said, "Brother Zhuowen, I think it's better to forget it. It's just 1,000 contribution points anyway. If you don't want it, then don't. There's no need to add to the trouble." Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "Brother don't worry, I will help you get your contribution points back. Since they provoked us, we will let them know that freshmen aren't as easy to bully as they think." After saying that, Zhuowen slowly stepped forward. terrifying demonic aura surged out and his blood-red hair fluttered, forming a terrifying blood cloud in the sky. His demonic aura overflowed and his eyes were full of unruliness. Brothers, let's let this arrogant kid know the consequences and price of arrogance. Let's attack together. Du Tao shouted loudly. With a stomp of his foot, he brought the other 7 people and rushed toward Zhuo Wen. They surrounded Zhuo Wen, and 8 terrifying auras locked onto Zhuo Wen. Seeing Du Tao command the 7 people to besiege Zhuo Wen, the other seniors in the square felt that something was wrong. They even looked down on Du Tao's actions. However, they also knew that this freshman Zhuo Wen was a little abnormal. Although Du Tao thought highly of himself, he also had some self-awareness. Even He Tao had been defeated by Zhuo Wen, and his strength was still a bit lower than He Tao's. If it was a one-on-one fight, it was absolutely impossible for him to be this freshman's opponent. Besieging him was the safest option. This Du Tao is really despicable. He doesn't dare to fight alone. Instead, he let a group of people besiege him. Under the shade of the tree, Moyan Wushang clenched his fist and said with a slightly fluctuating voice. The dean looked at Moyan Wushang, who was a little strange, and said, "This little guy is not simple. He might not lose." Kill. Du Tao shouted angrily. The sky piercer in his right hand fiercely swung down from the sky. Surging yuan power poured into the sky piercer halberd and turned into a sky full of halberd shadows. Like an endless hurricane, it swept toward Jun. The other 7 people also used their strongest moves and greeted Jun one after another. They didn't hold back. The colorful yuan power gathered together and formed an extremely terrifying energy ball. This ball of light contracted and expanded like a beating heart. It fell from the sky and rushed towards Jun. What a terrifying attack. I didn't expect Du Tao and the others to be serious. They actually joined forces and used their full strength. Looking at the terrifying energy ball, many seniors in the square turned pale. If they were to face the combined attack of Du Tao and the others, they would undoubtedly die. Zhuo Wen slowly raised his head. The blood-red light in his eyes deepened as an even more terrifying demonic aura erupted from his body. Immediately, his blood-red hair grew wildly, reaching his waist. Second-level bedevilment. An indifferent voice rang out. Zhuo Wen stretched out his right hand and sucked towards the sky. Suddenly, the blood cloud in the sky descended and fell around Jun. It rolled and surged, forming a protective force. Boom boom boom. The 8 people's attacks arrived as expected. Then, a violent explosion rang out. Under the collision of the energy, the whole square shook violently. Everyone in the square involuntarily retreated dozens of steps. After everyone stopped, they stared at the explosion ball with fear. They didn't expect the combined attack of Du Tao and the others to be so terrifying. Just the aftermath of the attack had such a terrifying effect. Brother Zhua. Mo Lingtian was the weakest. He almost retreated to the edge of the square. Looking at the figure of Zhuan, who was completely submerged in the explosion ball, he couldn't help but roar. There was a touch of guilt in his eyes. If Zhuan didn't stand up for him, he wouldn't have ended up like this. The number 1 new student is only SOSO. You actually dared to hoot in front of us. You really don't know what death is. Du Tao floated in midair, looking down at the figure submerged in the explosion ball. His eyes were filled with ridicule. He believed that Zhuo Wen would be seriously injured even if he didn't die from this attack. This was the consequence of provoking them. You really think that I'm only SOSO? The instant Du Tao finished speaking, a mocking voice suddenly rang out from behind Du Tao, causing Du Tao's entire body to stiffen. He was not unfamiliar with this voice. Wasn't it the new student who had hooted with them earlier? Just as Du Tao was about to turn around, he felt a powerful force rushing towards him from behind. Then he felt a pain on his back. He directly fell from midair and heavily smashed into the ground. Boom! The instant Du Tao smashed onto the ground, Zhuo Wen followed closely behind. Before Du Tao could get up, Zhuo Wen ferociously stomped his foot. The terrifying strength caused the entire plaza to tremble. Du Tao even spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fainted. His face was as pale as snow. The remaining 7 people also noticed Zhuo Wen. Their pupils shrank, and they immediately rushed towards Zhu. "Get lost!" Zhuan shouted. With a wave of his right hand, 7 blood-red mountains fell from the sky and smashed towards the 7 people. These blood-red mountains were formed by Zhuan's slaughter demon chi. They were extremely terrifying. At this moment, Zhuan was already in the 2nd level of the bedevilment state. The slaughter demon chi in his body was much more terrifying than the 1st level. Even Yuan Zhao was defeated by Zhuan when he was in the 2nd level of the bedevilment state, let alone Du Tao and the others. Boom, boom, boom. 7 blood-red mountains fell, heavily pressing down on the 7 people. The 7 people were suppressed on the ground of the square, unable to move at all. Defeated? Du Tao and the others were defeated even after joining forces? The seniors in the square were all stunned. They stared blankly at the 7 people suppressed by the 7 blood-red mountains and Du Tao who was under Zhuowen's foot. They only felt their minds go blank. If you had consciously handed them over earlier, you wouldn't have to suffer so much physical pain. If you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. Zhuan glanced at Du Tao under his foot indifferently. Then, he unceremoniously plundered the contribution points on Du Tao's body. After robbing Du Tao, Zhuan slowly walked towards the 7 blood-red mountains. Then, he did the same thing and plundered the contribution points on the others. Among these 8 people, Du Tao's contribution points was undoubtedly the most. He actually had 40,000 contribution points, which was 10,000 more than He Tao's. As for the other 7 people, their contribution points were much less. The 7 of them only had about 20,000 contribution points. In an instant, he had gained 60,000 contribution points. In addition to Zhuowen's original 40,000 contribution points, Zhuowen now had 100,000 contribution points. This was a huge sum. Most of the seniors in the outer court might not be able to gather so many contribution points. Chapter 1009. Returning to their residence, Brother take these 10,000 contribution points. These things will definitely be of great use in the cultivation tower. After collecting the contribution points from Du Tao and the rest, Zhuan took out 10,000 of his own contribution points and gave them to Mo Lingtian, causing the latter to feel overwhelmed by the favor. Brother Zhua, isn't 10,000 contribution points too much? Mo Lingtian asked in a somewhat flustered manner. Zhuan shook his head and said resolutely, "If you treat me as a friend, then take these contribution points." Seeing the resolute expression on Zhuowen's face, Mo Lingtian also calmed down. He nodded solemnly and said, "Brother Zhua, I won't say any more pretentious words. Mo Lingtian, will engrave this favor in my heart." Zhuan nodded and continued, "Let's return to our residence first. I believe that Jia Nan, Gatha and Xian Xing should have been arranged to stay in their residence. Let's go find them while we're at it." Hearing this, Mo Lingtian naturally did not have any objections. Soon after, the 2 of them left the plaza under the respectful gazes of the many older students in the plaza. Du Tao and his 7 subordinates stood up one after another. Their gazes were filled with hatred as they stared at Zhuowen's departing figure. They said in a low voice, "Bastard! Don't let me find you. Once I find you, my Emperor Pavilion will definitely not let you off." After speaking, Du Tao and his group left the plaza with their tails between their legs. Speaking of which, Du Tao and his group were really unlucky. They had clearly come here to earn some extra money. However, they did not expect to encounter a monster like Zhuan. Not only did they lose the contribution points that they had obtained, even the contribution points that they originally had were taken away by Zhuan. This time, the 8 of them were the same as He Tao. They had suffered a double loss. From today onwards, Zhuowen's name had truly begun to spread throughout the outer court. Not only had the number 1 freshman's contribution points not been taken away, but this audacious fellow had snatched the contribution points of the seniors instead. This was the first time such arrogant behavior had happened since the establishment of the outer court. In the past, although the strength of the new students recruited by the academy was also very strong, they were all inferior to the older students. Therefore, the new students who entered the outer court for the first time would basically have their new student rewards snatched away by the older students. Even though this sort of action was slightly like the strong bullying the weak, the higher-ups of the academy turned a blind eye to it. Because the students that the outer court recruited were all top geniuses from the various regions of the outside world, and all of them were arrogant and didn't know the immensity of the heavens and the earth. Moreover, the fact that the seniors snatched the contribution points of the new students was actually a way to dampen the spirits of the new students. It let these new students know that although their talents were the top in their respective regions, they were nothing in the outer court. It was to let them cultivate in a down-to-earth manner in the future, and not to be arrogant. Therefore, it was said that the bullying of the new students by the seniors had faintly become a tradition in the outer court. However, today, the number 1 freshman, Joan, had broken this tradition. Not only did he hold on to his own contribution points, but he also snatched the contribution points of the seniors. It was precisely because of such a gimmick that Joan's name had spread among many seniors in the outer court. Of course, these were all things that would happen later. Currently, Joan was still unaware of this matter. He was currently walking towards the residence arranged by the academy with Mo Lingtian. The two of them had the jade slip given by the dean, so they didn't have any embarrassing incidents like getting lost in the huge academy. The residences of the new students were uniformly arranged in a secluded bamboo forest in the northwest area of the outer court. The verdant bamboo forest, the loud and clear orioles, the elegant path, and the gentle breeze. This residence surrounded by the bamboo forest gave off a tranquil and distant feeling. Situated in this bamboo forest, Joan and Mo Lingtian leisurely walked, enjoying this leisurely tranquility. I really didn't expect that I would be able to enjoy such a tranquil time. This is truly unimaginable in the world of martial artists. Mo Lingtian comfortably stretched his waist and spoke in a relaxed manner. Joan nodded, a trace of a relaxed feeling in his eyes. This secluded bamboo forest seemed to have a charm that made one's heart as calm as water. Being in this bamboo forest, one's heart would always be able to naturally calm down. Narrowing his eyes, Joan couldn't help but think that ever since he came to this world of martial artists, it seemed that he had never enjoyed such a relaxed and tranquil atmosphere. In the world of martial artists, other than cultivation, there was only killing. If one didn't constantly become stronger, then one would always be eliminated by this world of martial artists where the strong preyed on the weak. Therefore, ever since Joan came to this world, he had never relaxed, nor did he allow himself to relax. In fact, Joan had long been fed up with this kind of world. However, there were times when people couldn't help themselves. Since Joan had already stepped into this world of martial artists, then he couldn't turn back. This was an endless path that couldn't be turned back. When you stepped onto this path, you would either become a stepping stone for others, forever becoming an insignificant passerby in history, or you would use others as a stepping stone to climb to a height that no one else could reach, allowing history to rewrite for you. Once you turned back, then all you would see would be countless piles of bones. That was the path that he had walked, the people that he had killed, and everything that he had missed. These past events would only bring in unbearable pressure to a martial artist. Therefore, in the world of martial artists, one couldn't turn back. One only needed to look forward and walk down the path that one believed to be right. Once one reached the peak, then one would be able to walk a smooth path of freedom. I finally understand the meaning of the phrase, "A person in Jianghu has no choice." Joan muttered in a low voice, the corners of his mouth revealing a trace of a bitter smile. From time to time, new students would pass by on the small path in the bamboo forest. Those new students who passed by naturally recognized Joan and Mo Lingtian. They respectfully nodded towards the two, and passed by the two. Very quickly, the two of them arrived at the depths of the bamboo forest. In the depths of the forest, there was a rather large open space. On the open space, there were rows of bamboo houses. Although the bamboo houses were simple and crude, they were rather elegant. Looks like these bamboo houses are the living quarters of us new students. However, the facilities seem a little simple and crude. Mo Lingtian frowned a little as he said, he was originally a prince of the Yenxian Empire and usually lived a life of luxury. Hence, he had an instinctive resistance towards these simple and crude bamboo houses before him. Zhuan shrugged his shoulders and said, "I feel that these bamboo houses are not bad. Moreover, the surrounding environment is not bad either. It is quite beneficial for training one's mental state." Upon hearing Zhuan's words, Mo Lingtian curled his lips and said, "I was just casually complaining and didn't really dislike these bamboo houses. However, I wonder if Xian Xing, Jianan and Gatha are in one of the bamboo houses in this open space?" Just as Mo Lingtian finished speaking, a rather excited voice was immediately transmitted from behind the two of them. "Big Brother Zhua, Big Brother Mo, the two of you have indeed returned." Upon hearing this, Zhuan and Mo Lingtian both turned their heads to look, and immediately saw Jianan excitedly running towards them. Behind Jianan was Gatha and Xian Xing. "Oh? You knew that the two of us would return?" After waiting for Jianan, Gatha and Xian Xing to arrive in front of them, Zhuan asked in a somewhat astonished manner, "Big Brother Zhua, other than the two of you, the other 8 of the top 10 new students have all returned. I even heard that the contribution points awarded to the 8 of them had all been taken away by the older students. We were still worried about the two of you, so we waited for you at the entrance of this open space. Indeed, we found you," Gatha said in a soft voice. Upon hearing this, Yuan and Mo Lingtian both looked at each other and saw a gentle smile in each other's eyes. It seemed that Jianan, Gatha and Xian Xing were very considerate and had actually personally waited for them at the entrance of their living quarters. "Brother Zhua, Brother Mo, are the two of you all right? I heard that the older students are very strong, and even Pom Pom was defeated in a few moves. Although Brother Zhua is very strong, he should not be a match for those older students. However, the two of you do not need to be discouraged. With the 2 of your talents, with the help of the cultivation tower, your strength will definitely rise very quickly. When that time comes, those older students who are trying to snatch your contribution points will be the ones who will be afraid." Xian Xing stood up, her beautiful eyes looking at Zhuan and Mo Lingtian as she softly consoled them. Evidently, she also believed that Zhuan and Mo Lingtian would not be able to escape the fate of having their contribution points snatched away. Sister Xian Xing is right. These older students rely on the cultivation tower's meridian tempering effect, allowing their yuan power to be tempered to be several times stronger than ordinary practitioners. Therefore, they are able to obtain battle strength that far surpasses their cultivation. Brother Zhua and Brother Mo are after all in the top 10 of this year's new students. With your talents, if you also enter the cultivation tower to cultivate for a period of time, those older students will be nothing more than clowns, unable to withstand a single blow. The 2 siblings, Jianan and Gatha, also hurriedly echoed. Obviously, they did not want Zhuan and Mo Lingtian to be traumatized by this matter. Seeing the concern in the 3's eyes, Zhuan and Mo Lingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Just as Zhuan was about to explain, a wave of noise suddenly sounded from another bamboo house, following which 2 figures came together. "It's Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong," Mo Lingtian said with a frown. Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong arrived in front of Zhuan and Mo Lingtian at the same time. The 2 of them stared at Zhuan. Yun Zhongyang opened his mouth and said, "I heard that you robbed He Tao, Du Tao, and the others of their contribution points?" The moment Yun Zhongyang's words came out, Jianan, Gatha, and Xian Xing were all stunned. They even suspected that they had misheard. The 3 of them naturally knew that the He Tao and Du Tao that Yun Zhongyang mentioned were the instigators of this year's competition for the top 10 spots of the new students. However, Yun Zhongyang said that the contribution points of these 2 seniors had been robbed by Zhuan. Zhuan raised his eyebrows. It seemed that Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong were quite well informed. It had not been long since he had robbed He Tao and Du Tao, but the 2 of them had already received the news. However, what made Zhuan a little puzzled was why the 2 of them had come over. "Brother Zhua, did you really rob He Tao and Du Tao of their contribution points?" Jianan asked with dry lips. Zhuan was already a monster enough to obtain the top spot of the new students, but now, even the seniors could not do anything to him. Instead, the seniors had been robbed by Zhuan. This kind of unimaginable thing had actually been done by Zhuan. Chapter 10:10. Cultivation Tower Hiss. Jia Nan and the other two gently inhaled a breath of cold air when they saw Zhuan nod his head in agreement. They exchanged glances and saw a trace of shock in each other's eyes. They really did not expect that not only had Zhuan's contribution points not been snatched away by the older students, he had even snatched away the older students' contribution points. Wasn't this action a little too shocking? They knew that every new student in the outer academy would snatch away the older students' contribution points as soon as they entered. Zhuan could be considered as the first person in history to do so. Zhuan slowly turned his head. His densely cold gaze landed on Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong as he said indifferently, "Then why have the two of you come?" Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong's expressions froze. Yun Zhongyang said in a low voice, "You are indeed strong enough. However, you should know that a portion of the contribution points you snatched away belonged to the top 10 of us new students. Are you going to openly take them away like this?" Zhuan's brows raised. He finally understood why Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong had come. They were actually planning to ask for contribution points from him. "You mean to say that you want my contribution points?" Zhuan's voice was slightly cold as he asked. Yun Zhongyang shook his head and said, "A portion of your contribution points is Yuan Kong's and my new student's reward. You can just return the reward that we deserve." "Did I, Yun, snatch the contribution points from the two of you?" Zhuan suddenly asked. Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong exchanged glances and shook their heads. Yun Zhongyang frowned slightly and said, "Although our contribution points were not snatched away by you, our contribution points are indeed with you." "Don't tell me," however, before Yun Zhongyang could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Zhuan. "Since it was not snatched away by me, then what do you want from me? If you have the ability, then go take back your contribution points from Heitao." "What does this have to do with me?" Zhuan said indifferently. "Zhuan, don't be unreasonable. Who doesn't know that Heitao's contribution points were taken by you, so my contribution points are naturally with you. Is there any meaning in reversing right and wrong like this? If you don't hand it over, I'll have no choice but to ask the dean for help." Yun Zhongyang's voice gradually turned cold. "Yun Zhongyang, don't you think you've gone too far? These contribution points were obtained by Brother Zhuo with great difficulty. What does it have to do with you?" Mo Lingtian said coldly. He couldn't stand it any longer. "Who are you to interrupt when we're talking here? Shut up." Yun Zhongyang glared fiercely at Mo Lingtian before turning his gaze back to Zhuan. Just as he was about to speak again, Zhuan's voice rang out once more. "Scram." Zhuan slowly spat out these words. A terrifying qi burst out from his body, causing Yun Zhongyang's expression to change drastically. This Zhuan was really unscrupulous. He actually dared to directly tell him to get lost. "Zhuan, this is the outer courtyard. It's not a place where you can run amok. You'd better restrain yourself." Yun Zhongyang still wanted to say something, but a terrifying force shot towards him like an arrow, causing his expression to change drastically. He pushed out both his palms and slammed them against the force. With a muffled groan, he took a few steps back. "If you still don't scram, then I'll ask you to scram." Zhuan slowly stood up. His gaze was bone-chilling. Yun Zhongyang and Sky Origin's expressions were extremely ugly. Their eyes flickered, but in the end, the two of them didn't have the courage to face Zhuan's anger. After all, Yuan wasn't even afraid of a terrifying senior like Heitao, and had even defeated the latter. Needless to say, they were no match for this kid. "Yuan, don't think that you're amazing just because you've obtained first place among the new students. Among the numerous geniuses in the outer courtyard, you're actually nothing." Yun Zhongyang fiercely glared at Zhuan before leaving with Sky Origin. Zhuan's gaze flickered as he watched Yun Zhongyang and Sky Origin leave. His brows furrowed slightly. Yun Zhongyang and Sky Origin's actions of suddenly coming over to ask for contribution points made Zhuan feel a little baffled. Moreover, he faintly felt that there was something wrong with the two of them. As for what was wrong, he couldn't put his finger on it. Yun Zhongyang and Sky Origin are really going overboard. Jianan said somewhat indignantly. Zhuan shook his head and said somewhat indifferently, "They're just two clowns. There's no need to pay too much attention to them. Also, Jianan, how are Zhang Tianzuan, Yan Di and the others?" Mo Lingtian's gaze also landed on Jianan. The principal had taken the top 10 of the new students away in advance. The situation back then was urgent, so no one related to them had been informed. That was why Zhuan had asked such a question. The Yan Di and the others from the Yenxian Empire have already left Excellent Spirit Island. He wants me to pass on a message to you. He wants you to properly cultivate in the academy. If you perform well, you'll have a chance to enter the 9th Netherworld realm. At that time, it'll be the time for you to soar. As for the 5 seniors Zhang Tianzuan, they can't enter the outer courtyard because they're not from the outer courtyard. They've found an inn in the main city and are temporarily staying there. Big brother Zhua, if you want to see them, I can take you there, Jianan said softly. Zhuan shook his head and said, "There's no need. I'm just asking. They have my communication imprint on them. If I want to find them, I'll naturally be able to." Zhang Tianzuan and the other 4 were considered the strongest forces under Zhuan. Zhuan planned to nurture them, especially Zhang Tianzuan. It would be best if he could advance to the Emperor realm as soon as possible. Therefore, Zhuan planned to enter the Azure Dragon Hall again when he became a Heavenly Venerate and bring the 5 Heavenly Venerates in. With the strength of the Azure Dragon's origin, Zhang Tianzuan and the others' cultivation would benefit greatly. Their chances of breaking through to the Emperor realm would also be much higher. Jianan, Gatha and Xian Xing. How many contribution points do the 3 of you have? Zhuan suddenly asked. Jianan and the other 2 exchanged glances, then smiled bitterly and said, "We new students have very few contribution points this time. Other than the top 10 new students, the rest of us only have 100 contribution points." Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. He stretched out his right hand and transferred 5,000 contribution points from the contribution list to Jianan. Gatha and Xianxing also received 5,000 contribution points each. Brother Zhua? Jianan was stunned. Seeing the number of contribution points soar to 5,001, she exclaimed in surprise. On the other hand, Jia Sha and Xianxing's reactions were similar. They didn't expect that Zhuowen would actually share the contribution points with them. Moreover, he directly gave each of them 5,000 contribution points. Contribution points are very important in the academy. If you don't have enough contribution points, you will be left behind from the start. This will not be beneficial to your future cultivation, Zhuowen said calmly. The 3 of them exchanged glances with each other before cupping their hands together in gratitude towards Zhuowen. At the same time, they also became closer to Zhuowen. Since Zhuowen was so generous as to give them 5,000 contribution points, it was obvious that he treated them as his own people. Zhuowen had a total of 100,000 contribution points. He could be considered wealthy. At the start, he gave Mo Lingtian 10,000 contribution points. Now, he took out 15,000 contribution points and distributed them to Jianan and the other 2. Currently, Zhuowen still had 75,000 contribution points in his hands. Now, let's go to the cultivation pagoda to take a look. It is said that the cultivation pagoda has the effect of tempering one's meridians. Moreover, for practitioners who enter the cultivation pagoda for the first time, the tempering effect is the highest. If there is a chance, it would be best for us to temper ourselves in the cultivation pagoda before coming out. That way, it would be quite beneficial to our strength. Mo Lingtian suddenly said with a smile. Brother Mo is right. Let's go to the cultivation pagoda together. Zhuan nodded and led the group out of the depths of the bamboo forest, heading towards the cultivation pagoda. Not long after Zhuan left, 2 figures walked out from the shadows. These 2 were Yun Zhongyang and Yuan Kong, who had asked for contribution points from Zhuowen earlier. Brother Yuan Kong, during this period of time, we need to keep track of Zhuowen's whereabouts. Once his contribution points are used up, that little bastard will definitely go out to do missions. That will be our chance to take revenge. Yun Zhongyang suddenly said in a cold voice. Yuan Kong's brows furrowed slightly as he said, "It is said that this kid has snatched quite a few contribution points. He will definitely not accept any missions from the academy in the short term. It doesn't matter. We just need to wait patiently. Not only has this guy humiliated me many times, he even killed your big brother Yuan Zhao. Will you be satisfied if this kid is not eliminated? Yun Zhongyang suddenly said. Of course not. Right now, I can't wait for this kid to die without a burial ground. Yuan Kong said through gritted teeth. The corners of Yun Zhongyang's mouth rose slightly as he said, so what we need to do now is wait. Wait until this little bastard goes out to do missions. Once he leaves the main city, the dean will not be able to care about Zhuowen's life or death. At that time, even if this little bastard dies, the dean will not suspect the sacred dynasty behind us. After all, the death rate of the academy's missions has always been quite high. Brother Yun is right. Right now, we can only wait. Moreover, we need to keep track of this little bastard's whereabouts at all times. Yuan Kong nodded, and the two of them slowly disappeared into the shadows. The cultivation pagoda stood at the center of the academy. Surrounding the cultivation pagoda was an extremely large plaza. In this plaza, there was a sea of people, bustling with activity, and it was extremely lively. Most of these people were heading towards the cultivation pagoda. Obviously, they were all planning to enter the cultivation pagoda to temper their meridians. Standing 100 meters away from the cultivation pagoda, Zhuowen, Mo Lingtian and the other two could clearly feel the ice and fire energy being transmitted from the cultivation pagoda. A moment ago, it was blazing hot, but in the next moment, it was as cold as an ice cellar. Standing near the cultivation pagoda, it was as if they were standing in a world of ice and fire. What powerful ice and fire energy! The cultivation pagoda in the outer courtyard is really mysterious. These two extreme energies, ice and fire, can actually exist together in such harmony. Mo Lingtian said with some emotion. Zhuan narrowed his eyes. He could faintly feel that the ice and fire saint symbol's origin in the cultivation pagoda was much stronger than the one he had obtained. Even the ice and fire saint symbol in his hands began to tremble. Kid. You can feel it too, right? The origin of the ice and fire saint symbol in the cultivation pagoda is quite powerful. I'm afraid that an expert from the inner courtyard forcefully stripped a part of the ice and fire saint symbol's origin and sealed it under the cultivation pagoda with a supreme secret technique. Moreover, there are layers of powerful origin arrays in the cultivation pagoda. Chapter 10-11. The price of the cultivation pagoda. Zhuowen nodded. The holy ice-fire rune he had obtained from Ba Shui was incomplete. It was only a trace of the holy ice-fire rune's origin. It could be said that it was extremely rare. This was also the reason why the holy ice-fire rune was of less help to Zhuowen as his strength increased. In the final analysis, the holy symbol of ice-fire in his hand was only a trace of the origin, and the power of the holy symbol of ice-fire was too little. Zhuowen had the complete holy symbol of ice-fire, his strength would have risen to an extremely terrifying level. However, the ice-fire energy contained in the cultivation pagoda was many times stronger than the holy ice-fire rune in his hand. Obviously, the holy ice-fire rune's origin was much stronger than the one Zhuowen had obtained. Xiaohei, do you think it's possible for me to snatch the holy ice-fire rune's origin sealed in the cultivation pagoda? Zhuowen suddenly asked in a whimsical manner. Boy, are you dreaming? Don't tell me you don't know how powerful the holy rune's energy is? When you refined that trace of origin, you also relied on the power of the rune spirit to succeed. The holy rune's origin in the cultivation pagoda is much stronger than the one you have. With your current strength, trying to snatch such a powerful origin is simply courting death. Unless you have already controlled the rune spirit, you will definitely be devoured by the ice-fire rune's origin in the cultivation pagoda. At that time, you won't even know how you died. Xiaohei said coldly. Zhuowen shrugged and said, I'm naturally aware of that, and I was merely thinking about it. However, the quintessence within this cultivation pagoda is formidable. Just these terrifying seals and restrictions outside the pagoda aren't something that I can deal with. It's good that you know. You have a trace of the holy ice-fire talisman's origin. You can't let the people of the Divine Academy know about this. If they find out, they will definitely order you to hand it over. They might even convict you. At that time, you won't be able to clear your name even if you jump into the Yellow River, Xiao He continued to warn. Zhuan nodded solemnly. Back when he was in the Qing Xin Empire, not many people knew about the existence of sacred talismans. Therefore, when Zhuan used the Ice Flame sacred talisman, he was not recognized. However, he was currently in the Jiaxin Institute. This was a world much larger than the Azure Xian Empire. Experts were as common as clouds, and there were probably many people who knew about the existence of the Holy Talisman. If Zhuan rashly exposed the Ice Fire Saint Talisman, it was very likely that he would get into trouble. After all, Zhuan was not stupid. He would not easily expose the Ice Fire Saint Talisman unless his strength reached a certain level. Brother Zhua, shall we enter the cultivation pagoda to take a look? Mo Ling Tian asked Zhuan. Go. Let's go in and take a look. Zhuan nodded. There was a trace of anticipation in his eyes. He wanted to see if the cultivation pagoda was really as magical as the seniors had said. It could actually increase one's strength by several times or even dozens of times by tempering one's meridians. The cultivation pagoda was divided into 10 levels. Then, Mo Ling Tian and the rest followed the flow of people to the first level of the cultivation pagoda. Behind the arched door was a large living room. The floor was covered with smooth tiles. Although there were many people inside, the living room was large and did not seem crowded at all. In front of the living room, there were 5 aisles. At the entrance of each aisle, there was a glass counter. On the counter stood a woman in a cheongsam with a smile. What surprised Zhuan was that the cultivation of the 5 cheongsam women standing on the counter was not low. The lowest cultivation was in the Xuanzuan realm, and the highest was in the sovereign realm. Zhuan led Mo Ling Tian to a counter. The cheongsam woman in front of the counter immediately looked at Zhuan and the rest with a smile. Junior brothers and junior sisters, which level of the cultivation room do you intend to enter? The cheongsam woman asked with a smile. Junior brothers and junior sisters? Senior sister is also a student of the outer court? Zhuan and the rest were surprised. Looking at the way the cheongsam woman addressed them, it seemed that she was also a student of the outer court. They had thought that she was just a staff member. The cheongsam woman also saw the surprise on Zhuan and the rest's faces. Her beautiful eyes flickered as if she had thought of something. She smiled and said, "The 5 of you are new students? At first, you didn't think that I was a staff member of the academy, did you?" Zhuan and the rest looked at each other and smiled awkwardly. At first, they did think that the cheongsam woman was a staff member. Moreover, they did not expect that the students of the outer court would not enter the cultivation room to cultivate. Instead, they worked as service staff at the counter. To tell you the truth, there are no staff members in the outer court. The chores in the cultivation room are all assigned by the students of the outer court. The cheongsam woman seemed to have thought of something and explained with a bitter smile. The chores are also done by the students? Don't the students need to cultivate? Jianan asked curiously. Junior brother, you have not lived in the outer court, so you naturally do not know the cruelty of the outer court. The annual tuition fee of the outer court is 20,000 contribution points. If you are unable to gather 20,000 contribution points in a year, you will be expelled by the academy. Moreover, cultivation requires contribution points. If you do not have contribution points, you do not have the qualifications to enter the cultivation tower to cultivate. Other than that, the resources, weapons, chi methods, and so on that you need will not be given to you for free by the academy. You will need contribution points to exchange for them. At this point, the bitterness on the cheongsam woman's pretty face became even more intense. She continued, if you have contribution points in the outer court, you will be able to obtain everything you want. However, if you do not have contribution points, it will be difficult for you to move forward. You might even face the danger of being expelled. To the monstrous geniuses of the outer court, it is very easy for them to obtain contribution points. After all, they are very powerful. They only need to complete a few missions of high difficulty and high reward. In one go, they will be able to obtain tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of contribution points. However, ordinary students are unable to do so. In order to allow ordinary students to survive, the Academy has arranged many miscellaneous jobs in the Academy. As long as you complete these miscellaneous jobs, you will be able to obtain some contribution points as a reward. This counter-service is one of the miscellaneous jobs that I have obtained. Hearing these words, Fun, Mo Ling Tian and the rest were startled. They had just entered and were completely unaware that doing miscellaneous jobs would also give them contribution points as a reward. However, they also knew that the rewards for such miscellaneous jobs would definitely not be very high. If it was a student with an ordinary aptitude, perhaps they would be willing to do such low-paying and boring miscellaneous jobs. However, those who were talented and powerful would definitely choose to do those high-risk and high-reward missions. The Cheongsam woman in front of them was only at the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm. Looking at her age, she should be around 26 years old. Her aptitude was indeed not as good as those talented geniuses. However, in the outside world, she was considered a rare genius. Zhuan and the rest nodded their heads as they sighed in their hearts. It seemed that the Academy also followed the law of the jungle. The stronger one would naturally be, and the weaker one would gradually fade into the crowd. Since they were unable to make themselves stronger, the weak would ultimately choose to be content with the status quo. It could even be said that they were satisfied with the miscellaneous jobs that the Academy had arranged for them. However, they did not know that this would only cause the gap between them and the other geniuses to become larger and larger. In the end, it would form an insurmountable gap. However, these were the choices of others. Zhuan naturally would not meddle in other people's business. He only wanted to ensure that he would constantly become stronger and be able to protect the people and things that he cherished. Senior, can you introduce us to this cultivation pagoda? After all, we are also new students who have just arrived. We really do not know anything about this cultivation pagoda. Zhuan suddenly asked with a smile. The Cheongsam woman nodded her head. This was her job and she naturally would not refuse. You guys have also seen it. The cultivation pagoda is divided into 10 floors. Every floor has many private rooms. Within these private rooms, there is an enormous amount of ice and fire energy. These ice and fire energy can temper the meridians. Of course, the effect of tempering the meridians on each floor of the cultivation pagoda is different. The first floor's effect is the worst. As the number of floors increases, the effect of tempering will also gradually increase. The 10th floor's effect is the best. Of course, it also requires the most contribution points. The Cheongsam woman indifferently explained. Senior, can you introduce us to the price of each floor of the cultivation pagoda? Jianan suddenly asked. The Cheongsam woman nodded her head and continued. The first floor's price is 10 contribution points per hour. The second floor's price is 20 contribution points per hour and so on. The 10th floor's price is 100 contribution points per hour. As soon as these words were spoken, Yun, Mo Ling Tian, and the other 4 all frowned. The price of this cultivation pagoda was very expensive. Just the first floor's price was 10 contribution points per hour. That meant that one day, 12 hours would cost 120 contribution points. 1 month would cost 3,600 contribution points, and 1 year would cost 43,200 contribution points. This was a huge sum of money. Even on the first floor, there might not be anyone who had so many contribution points. The amount of contribution points required to stay in there for a year was just too much. What was even more abnormal was the 10th floor. Every hour required 100 contribution points. The price was 10 times that of the first floor. In other words, staying on the 10th floor for a year would cost more than 400,000 contribution points. This was just too terrifying. As everyone knew, a martial artist's cultivation was usually measured in years. With the cultivation pagoda's price being so expensive, some martial artists who did not have much wealth would only be able to cultivate in the cultivation pagoda for a few days. Even martial artists who had a lot of contribution points would find it difficult to cultivate in the cultivation pagoda for more than half a year. After all, the price was just too high. Juniors, You are all new students. You should have never tempered your meridians in the cultivation pagoda, right? However, I need to remind you that the first tempering of your meridians is extremely important. You must stay in there for a month. This way, the first tempering of your meridians will be perfect. In the future, it will also be able to expand your meridians and build a solid foundation. Chapter 10-12. 10th level of the cultivation tower. Seeing the serious expression on the Cheongsam lady's pretty face, Zhuowen and the rest also knew the importance of the first month. Fortunately, regardless of whether it was Jia Nan's trio or himself and Mo Lingtian, their contribution points had already exceeded the minimum of 3,600 points. Big brother Zhuowen, let's start tempering on the first level for a month first. Jia Nan suddenly said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded his head. Jia Nan, Gatha and Xian Xing had a total of 5,100 contribution points, which was enough to train on the first level for a month. Senior sister, help the three of us to open a private room on the first level. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, Jia Nan said to the Cheongsam lady, the three of you have 3,600 contribution points on you? Seeing that Jia Nan and the other two from the Xuanzun realm actually planned to open a private room on the first level for a month, the Cheongsam lady was a little surprised. She knew that the outer court's recruitment of new students had just ended. Generally speaking, it was impossible for new students to have so many contribution points on them, unless the three of them were among the top 10 new students this time and had obtained the new student reward. However, the three of them only had the cultivation of the Xuanzun realm. Generally speaking, it was not very possible for them to enter the top 10 new students. With a doubtful expression, the Cheongsam lady's gaze involuntarily landed on the contribution points on the wrists of Jia Nan and the other two. When she saw that their contribution points were all 5,100, she was completely stunned. 3 practitioners from the Xuanzun realm were able to have so many contribution points the moment they entered? Wasn't this too inconceivable? Fortunately, the Cheongsam lady's mental fortitude was not bad and she quickly regained her senses. Although she was very confused in her heart, she still dutifully opened 3 private rooms for Jia Nan and the other two. At the same time, she also deducted 3,600 contribution points from their contribution points. Big brother Zhua, big brother Mo, will go to the private rooms first. After the Cheongsam lady opened the private rooms, she took out 3 jade keys and handed them to Jia Nan and the other two. After the 3 of them greeted Zhuowen and Mo Lingtian, they excitedly walked towards their respective private rooms. From their appearance, it was obvious that they could not wait to try out the might of the cultivation tower. Brother Mo, which floor do you intend to go to? Zhuowen suddenly asked Mo Lingtian. Mo Lingtian shrugged his shoulders and helplessly said, my limit should be the 2nd floor. Moreover, it seems that the higher you go, the better the effect is. Naturally, I will choose the 2nd floor. As he spoke, Mo Lingtian booked a private room on the 2nd floor with the Cheongsam lady. This caused the Cheongsam lady to be even more surprised. How could each of these new students be so wealthy? She really didn't know how they got their contribution points. After Mo Lingtian received the corresponding jade key, he greeted Zhuowen and walked up the stairs at the end of the hall to the 2nd floor. When it was Zhuowen's turn, the Cheongsam lady's beautiful eyes stared at Zhuowen. Just now, she could see that this young man in front of her should be the leader of the 5 people. The other 4 people followed his lead. She knew that this young man should have the most contribution points. Junior, are you planning to open a private room on the 3rd floor? The Cheongsam lady smiled tenderly and asked. However, Zhuowen shook his head and said something that caused the Cheongsam lady to be stunned. Senior, please open a private room on the 10th floor for me. The Cheongsam lady's smile froze. She even suspected that she was hearing things. This new student in front of her actually said that he was planning to open a private room on the 10th floor. Could it be that he was joking? Junior, did you make a mistake just now? Are you really planning to open a private room on the 10th floor? You must know that staying on the 10th floor for a month costs 36,000 contribution points. After regaining her senses, the Cheongsam lady reluctantly revealed a trace of a smile. 36,000 contribution points, to the Cheongsam lady, was already a huge sum of money. After all, her annual remuneration for working in the cultivation tower did not exceed 30,000 contribution points. However, this new student in front of her actually planned to spend such a huge sum of money to stay on the 10th floor for a month. This could no longer be described as extravagant. It must be known that generally, the martial artists who cultivated on the 10th floor of the cultivation tower were basically the top geniuses of the students or members of powerful forces within the academy. Ordinary students simply did not have the financial resources to stay on the 10th floor. Looking at the Cheongsam lady's expression, Juan also knew that the former did not believe that he had so many contribution points in his hands. In desperation, Juan could only show the contribution points in his hands to the Cheongsam lady. However, the moment the 75,000 contribution points appeared in the Cheongsam lady's eyes, she immediately fell into a state of shock. This young man in front of her actually had 75,000 contribution points. Was this a joke? Was this the contribution points that a new student could have? It seems that Senior has misunderstood Junior. Senior will immediately open a private room on the 10th floor for you. After regaining her senses, the Cheongsam lady nimbly took out a jade key and handed it over to Jun. At the same time, she also deducted 36,000 contribution points from Zhuowen's contribution points form. After taking the jade key, Yuan was about to leave the living room and head to the 10th floor when the Cheongsam lady suddenly asked, "Junior, are you really a new student?" Yuan was startled for a moment, but soon after, he smiled and said, "Guaranteed to be genuine. Otherwise, how could Junior not even know the distribution of the cultivation tower and need to ask Senior?" Hearing this, the Cheongsam lady was startled. Soon after, she clenched her teeth and said, "Can you tell me your name?" Jun. An indifferent voice entered the Cheongsam lady's ears. Soon after, Zhuowen's figure walked towards the depths of the living room. As the Cheongsam lady looked at the back of that figure, a trace of absent-mindedness appeared in her eyes. Her mouth muttered, "Don? This name seems somewhat familiar." When Zhuowen's figure finally disappeared from the Cheongsam lady's sight, the Cheongsam lady's beautiful eyes suddenly focused. She almost cried out in surprise. She finally knew why the name Zhuowen was so familiar. It was because today, there was a rather sensational news whose main character seemed to be called Jun. It was said that Jun was this year's new student's #1. His strength was unfathomable. The outer court's elite, He Tao, originally wanted to snatch Zhuowen's contribution points. However, in the end, he was defeated by Zhuowen and his contribution points were snatched instead. Moreover, the members of the Emperor Pavilion, Du Tao and the other 8, were suppressed by Zhuon. Without exception, their contribution points were snatched away. This was the first time in the history of the outer court that a new student snatched the contribution points of an old student. Therefore, when this matter happened, the news was like a flood and ferocious beast, crazily spreading throughout the outer court. Even the Cheongsam lady had heard of Zhuowen's name. However, the Cheongsam lady never expected that she would actually personally meet the new student who was at the center of public opinion. The Cheongsam lady didn't know how to describe her current mood and feeling. Regarding the Cheongsam lady's inner thoughts, Zhuon naturally didn't know. The current him was walking up the stairs, step by step, towards the top of the tower. The instant he walked up the stairs, Zhuon felt an extremely surging ice and fire energy. This ice and fire energy drilled into his body and flowed along his meridians. Although he wasn't used to it at first, Yuan gradually felt a comfortable feeling throughout his body. Moreover, Yuan also discovered that the meridians in his body actually felt a trace of smoothness under the flow of the ice and fire energy. It seemed that what the dean said was right. This ice and fire energy did indeed have the miraculous effect of tempering meridians. After all, Yuan was only on the stairs now. The ice and fire energy that he came in contact with was the most superficial. If Zhuowen entered the private room, he would come in contact with the essence of the ice and fire energy. The tempering effect would definitely be much stronger. Following the stairs to the top of the tower, Yuan also discovered that the higher he went, the denser the ice and fire energy, the better the tempering effect on his meridians. Very quickly, Juon reached the 10th floor. The 10th floor also had a living room. Around the living room were stone doors that were several feet tall. On the right side of the stone doors, there were small keyholes. These keyholes should be the places where the jade keys should be inserted. The corresponding jade keys corresponded to the corresponding stone doors. Moreover, Yuan also discovered that there were quite a few figures sitting cross-legged in the empty space in the living room. The auras of these figures were very powerful and vast. Their cultivations were basically at the Golden Exalt realm, and the strongest had even reached the peak of the Golden Exalt realm. Perhaps because they discovered that someone had come up, these figures slowly opened their eyes and shot their gazes toward Jun. When they saw that Jun was only at the late stage of the Supreme Being realm, a trace of astonishment appeared in their eyes. Clearly, in their opinion, a mere Supreme Being realm actually came up to the 10th floor. It was really a little strange. Supreme Being realm trash actually dared to come to the living room of the 10th floor to freeload the ice and fire energy. You've got guts. A mocking voice sounded, causing Zhuowen's eyes to narrow slightly. He turned his head and immediately fixed his gaze on a man. This man was dressed in a black robe and had short brown-green hair. He was about 27 or 28 years old. At this moment, he was looking at Zhuowen with a mocking expression, as if he was looking at a joke. This man's aura was considered relatively low among the group of people in the living room. His cultivation was around the early stage of the Golden Exalt realm. Freeload the ice and fire energy? What do you mean by that? Zhuowen indifferently asked the man. The green-haired man, who originally had a mocking expression, didn't expect Zhuowen to suddenly ask such a question. His face froze, and a trace of astonishment appeared in his eyes. However, very quickly, anger appeared on his face. He felt that this young man in front of him was teasing him. The green-haired man stood up with a cold gaze and said with a cold expression, "Are you teasing me by asking a question that you already know the answer to?" "Teasing you? I didn't mean that. It's just that I don't know what freeloading the ice and fire energy means." Zhuowen slightly frowned and said with a frown. Looking at Zhuowen's expression, the green-haired man knew that Zhuowen wasn't lying. His eyes flickered as he said, "It seems that you don't know anything? Could it be that you're a new student who just joined the academy this time?" Zhuowen nodded and didn't deny it. The other men in the living room, who were sitting cross-legged, revealed expressions of understanding. No wonder this young man didn't know anything. It turned out that he was a newborn calf. A mere new student actually dares to come to the 10th floor to freeload the ice and fire energy. I really admire your courage. However, your attitude just now wasn't very good, so I'm not in a good mood. As your senior, I have to teach you a lesson. Chapter 10:13. Snatching the jade key. Looking at the green-haired man slowly walking over, the chilliness in Zhuowen's eyes grew even colder. Tian had never provoked this green-haired man, yet the latter actually wanted to teach him a lesson without distinguishing between right and wrong. Did he really think that Zhuowen was a pushover? Before I deal with you, let me tell you what it means to freeload the ice and fire energy. The contribution points we have aren't enough to pay for the rooms on the 10th floor, but just the ice and fire energy in this living room is already comparable to the density of the rooms on the first floor. Generally speaking, Supreme Being students don't have the qualifications to freeload the ice and fire energy on the 10th floor. So, you've crossed the line. If you understand, the next step is for the seniors to educate the juniors. As he spoke, the green-haired man arrived in front of Zhuowen. The chilliness in his eyes grew even more intense. He was originally the weakest member on this floor. Usually, he would be afraid to freeload the ice and fire energy here. Faced with such a situation, the green-haired man had long been suppressing his anger in his heart. But now, a Supreme Being kid with a lower cultivation than him had come. Therefore, he was prepared to vent the anger in his heart on Zhuowen. "I understand." Zhuowen nodded, pretending to be serious. So that's how it was. No wonder he could see many cultivators sitting cross-legged in the living room on every floor when he ascended the stairs. It turned out that they were freeloading the ice and fire energy that flowed out from the rooms for free. However, although the living room was large enough, there were even more students in the academy. It could be said that there were too many monks and too little gruel. Without a certain level of strength, it was really impossible to freeload a good place. Zhuan's cultivation was only at the late stage of the Supreme Being stage, but he had come to the 10th floor. In the eyes of the green-haired man and the others, he was overestimating himself. Perhaps, even if the green-haired man didn't make a move, the others would have. After all, in their eyes, Zhuan's actions were crossing the line. Zhuan's calm attitude caused the green-haired man to be a little surprised. However, he sneered in his heart, thinking that Zhuan was just forcing himself to be calm. Do you understand? I'm afraid you don't understand the current situation at all. As he spoke, the green-haired man's aura erupted to the extreme. Then, he clenched his right hand into a fist and swung it toward Zhuan. The might of this punch was extraordinary. If an ordinary exalted realm cultivator were to be struck by it, they would definitely be heavily injured. He's really a newborn calf. He's actually scared stiff on the spot. Seeing the green-haired man's fist coming at him, Zhuan didn't take any defensive stance. He just stood there indifferently and looked at the fist energy that was whizzing towards him. In the eyes of the other people in the living room, this Supreme Being realm youth was probably scared silly. When everyone imagined that Zhuan would be seriously injured, they saw Zhuan slowly stretch out his hand and pinch the green-haired man's right fist. Then, Zhuan suddenly twisted it, and the crisp sound of bones cracking echoed in the living room. Ah! Soon after, a miserable shriek was heard. Subsequently, the green-haired man, who was originally full of confidence and arrogance, had his face completely turned purple. His right hand was already twisted at an irregular angle and was being held in Zhuowen's hand. The people in the living room, who were originally full of ridicule, fell silent. Even the sneers on their faces had completely stiffened as they stared blankly at this scene. The green-haired man's cultivation was at the initial stage of the Golden Exalt realm. Although he was at the bottom of the group, it should be more than enough to deal with a late-stage Supreme Being realm cultivator. But now, the late-stage Supreme Being realm cultivator, who should have been crushed, was standing on the spot. On the other hand, the green-haired man's hand had been crushed and he was screaming miserably. "Senior, didn't you want to deal with me? What's going on now? Why haven't you dealt with me yet?" Zhuowen's voice was very calm as he pinched the green-haired man's right hand. It slowly sounded in the living room, causing many people to squint their eyes. It seemed that this late-stage Supreme Being realm freshman was not simple. He could actually defeat an initial-stage Golden Exalt realm cultivator so easily. The green-haired man could not explain his suffering. He did not expect that Zhuowen, who he thought was a soft persimmon, would turn out to be a tough nut to crack. Not only did he not gain any benefits, but he also got himself into trouble. "Junior, I was just joking just now. I was just joking. Don't take it too seriously. Let me go, please?" The green-haired man quickly begged for mercy. "Get lost." Zhuan could not be bothered with the arrogant green-haired man. He kicked his waist, causing the green-haired man to retreat dozens of steps. Then, Zhuan looked at the surrounding stone doors as if nothing had happened. As for the green-haired man, after Zhuowen let go of his hand, he hurriedly covered his dislocated right arm and left the 10th floor dejectedly. Retrieving the jade key from his spirit ring, he noticed that the jade key was engraved with the number 37. Obviously, this jade key was the key to the 37th room. When Zhuan took out the jade key, the group of people in the living room narrowed their eyes, causing a commotion. Originally, they thought that Zhuowen came up to the 10th floor to freeload the ice and fire energy. But now, Zhuowen took out the jade key to the stone door. They knew that they were wrong. This guy was not there to freeload the ice and fire energy. He was there to enter the 10th floor's room. At this moment, many people in the living room revealed a greedy look. The contribution points needed to enter the 10th floor were too many. They did not have so many contribution points to spend in the 10th floor's room. So, they could only freeload the ice and fire energy in this way. As for those people who wanted to rob the 10th floor's rooms, they did not think of it. However, those who could open rooms on the 10th floor were all terrifying geniuses in the outer court. The weakest of them was at the early stage of the heavenly venerable realm. Even if they wanted to, they did not have the guts. However, the young man in front of them was obviously a new student who did not know anything. Although he had some strength, he did not have any background. Snatching this kind of newborn calf did not require any effort at all. They did not even have to worry about the big background behind him causing trouble. Looking around the stone doors in front of him, Juan quickly found the 37th room. However, just as Juan was about to take out the jade key and open the 13th room, 3 whistling sounds suddenly came from behind him. Juan frowned slightly. He suddenly sensed that among the group of people in the living room, there were actually 3 people rushing towards him. Moreover, the auras of these 3 people were very strong, far stronger than that of the green-haired man. They were actually ancient martial art practitioners at the peak of the golden venerable realm. With a stomp of his feet, Juan was like a nimble fish as he instantly dodged to the side, dodging the attacks of the 3 men behind him. Then, Juan slowly turned around and stared coldly at the 3 men in front of him who had missed. It's actually the 3 brothers, Ling Su, Ling Yi and Ling Huan. I did not expect the 3 of them to make a move. Nonsense. This young man at the Supreme Realm has a jade key to a room. Although his battle strength is not weak, he is only at the Supreme Realm. Moreover, he is a new student and does not have any background. Who would resist the temptation to rob him? Whispers rang out in the living room. The rest of the people who were originally ready to make a move quietened down after seeing the 3 brothers and suppressed the restlessness in their hearts. The 3 brothers were the strongest among the group of people on the 10th level. They were at the peak of the golden venerable realm and no one dared to offend them. Hand over the jade key and get out of the 10th level. The eldest brother, Ling Su, slowly walked out and stared coldly at Chun. Originally, the 3 of them were not interested in the battle between Juan and the green-haired man. After watching for a while, they each went back to their own seats to cultivate. However, at this moment, Juan took out the jade key to the room and finally attracted the attention of the 3 brothers. In fact, they were even greedy for it. The young man before them was only a new student and his cultivation was only at the advanced stage of the Supreme Realm. However, he had the jade key to the room. This was an extremely tempting bait for the 3 brothers. How could they let go of such an opportunity to enter the room for free? Hand over the jade key to you? Get out of the room? Jun narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Ling Su nodded and said arrogantly, "Don't tell me you don't understand my words? If you don't want to lose an arm or break a leg, you'd better hand over the jade key. I don't want to waste my energy." Ling Yi and Ling Hao stood on either side of Ling Su with their arms crossed. They stared indifferently at Juan, as if they were certain that Juan would be defeated. You are really shameless. How can you say it so naturally when you want to take things by force? Your skin has already reached a new level. Juan suddenly mocked. The 3 brothers' eyes darkened. Ling Su stomped his foot and said, "It seems that you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. In that case, don't blame me for being rude." With that, Ling Su stomped his foot and instantly swept toward Jun. A terrifying aura swept out from his back and turned into a giant eagle with its wings spread. The eagle's sharp eyes stared coldly at Juan, as if the latter was its prey. Ling Yi and Ling Hao did not make a move. Ling Su was at the peak of the golden venerate realm, while Juan was only at the advanced stage of the supreme realm. This was a battle without any suspense. They all knew that Juan would lose without a doubt. Boom! A terrifying demonic will suddenly gushed out from Juan's body. Then, Juan immediately entered the first level of the bedevilment realm. The terrifying demonic will rolled out and turned into countless killing demonic chi. Looking at Juan, whose aura suddenly surged, Ling Su's eyes changed slightly. He did not expect that the young man before him would have such a strong demonic will. Demonic cultivator? Murmuring softly, Ling Su's attack had already landed. The giant eagle behind him let out a shrill cry and suddenly descended from the sky, flying towards Jun. Its sharp claws enveloped Juan, as if it wanted to tear Juan apart. Die! Juan spat out this word indifferently. Then, a terrifying demonic will of slaughter surged out. He stretched out his hand and formed a mountain-like blood-red hand, grasping the giant eagle in his hand. A wail sounded. The giant figure was trapped in the blood-red hand and was unable to extricate itself. Chapter 10:14. Get lost. Damn it. How can he be so strong? Ling Su's pupils constricted. With a roar, the aura on his body surged out. He clasped his hands together and a terrifying Yuanli surged out. Suddenly, countless eagle shadows appeared and formed a defense in front of him. Break! Zhuowen's indifferent voice resounded. Then, the terrifying crimson hand crushed everything like a 10,000-foot master. The eagle shadow defense could not withstand for long before it crumbled inch by inch. Spurt! Ling Su spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out. His face was as pale as snow. Zhuan did not intend to let Ling Su go. With a wave of his right hand, the crimson hand swept out and pinched Ling Su. Big brother! Ling Yi and Ling Huan roared as they rushed out. Terrifying yuan power surged out in an attempt to save Ling Su, who was being pinched by the crimson hand. Zhuowen's gaze was cold. With a stomp of his foot, two large blood-red hands swept out. Ling Yi and Ling Hao were slightly weaker than Ling Su, so it was impossible for them to resist the grasp of the large blood-red hands. They were caught by the large blood-red hands in a few moves. The entire hall fell into a strange silence. The students who were about to make a move froze on the spot as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over them. They did not expect Zhuowen's strength to be so terrifying. The three brothers, Ling Su, Ling Yi, and Ling Huan, were at the peak of the Golden Venerate realm. However, they could not even withstand one move from the youth at the advanced stage of the Supreme Being realm and were captured alive. Some of the students who were about to make a move rejoiced in their hearts. Fortunately, they did not act rashly. Otherwise, they would end up in a worse state than the three brothers. The three of you only have this much strength and you intend to snatch the jade key from me. Where did you three trash get your confidence from? Zhuan stared at the three brothers, who were being pinched by the crimson hand, and said indifferently. Ling Su and the other two were far weaker than He Tao and Du Tao. Although they were all at the peak of the Golden Venerable realm, they were only slightly stronger than ordinary peak Golden Venerables. However, He Tao and Du Tao both had the battle prowess of an early-stage Heavenly Venerable. Clearly, within the Outer Academy, even if one's cultivation level was the same, there was still a huge gap between their fighting strength. Some people were able to casually jump levels to fight, while others could only allow others to jump levels to fight. The gap was not an ordinary kind of large. The eyelids of the three Ling Su brothers twitched as a trace of regret surfaced in their eyes. If they knew that the fighting strength of this young man before them was so terrifying, they would never have provoked Zhuowen even if they were beaten to death. Junior. In the future, we won't dare to provoke you anymore. Please spare me? Ling Shu braced himself and could only admit defeat. At first, the three of you saw that my cultivation was low and thought that I was a pushover. Now that you think that I'm a pushover, you're begging for mercy. How can there be such an easy thing in this world? Zhuowen said coldly. Then what do you want? Ling Shu's face was pale as he braced himself to ask again. Zhuowen's gaze was extremely calm as he continued, hand over your contribution points and get out of the 10th level. Otherwise, I don't mind breaking your arms and legs. Hearing Zhuowen's naked threat, the eyes of the three Ling Su brothers flickered and their faces were extremely ugly. This sentence was exactly the same as what Ling Shu had said previously. Obviously, Un was returning the favor. What? You don't want to hand it over? Zhuowen's voice suddenly turned cold. Immediately, the force of the crimson hand became extremely terrifying, causing the three Ling Su brothers to involuntarily cry out in pain. We'll hand it over. Let us go. The three Ling Su brothers broke out in cold sweat as they hurriedly said. Zhuowen nodded. With a wave of his right hand, the crimson hand that was holding the three Ling Su brothers loosened. The three Ling Su brothers fell to the ground and cried out in pain. Hand it over. Zhuowen took a big stride forward to the three Ling Su brothers and said indifferently as he spread out his right hand. The Ling Su trio exchanged glances with each other. All of them revealed a bitter expression as they obediently handed over the contribution points in their hands to Zhuowen. After all, they were currently in a stronger position and they did not dare to disobey Zhuowen's request. Although no one was allowed to kill anyone in the academy, if someone used underhanded means to cripple you, even the academy would not be too calculative about this matter. After all, it was inevitable that there would be friction between cultivators. When there was friction, there would be injuries. As long as no one was killed, the academy would not meddle in other people's business. After handing over all their contribution points to Zhuowen, the three Ling Su brothers left the 10th level with their tails between their legs. They could not stay here for a moment longer. Moreover, Ling Su and the other two were indeed poor. The three of them only had 6,000 contribution points in total. To Zhuowen, this amount of contribution points was really a small amount. Who else wants this jade key? Zhuowen looked around the living room with a chilling gaze. Instantly, the entire living room fell into silence. No one answered and everyone maintained their silence. What a joke! Even the three Ling Su brothers were defeated by this person. How would they dare to compete with this person? Wouldn't that be asking for a snub? Seeing that everyone in the living room was silent, the corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up slightly. It seemed that defeating the three Ling Su brothers in a thunderous manner had a great deterrent effect. I want this jade key of yours. Suddenly, a cold snort sounded from the entrance of the stairs to the 10th level, attracting the attention of everyone in the living room. Thud thud thud. What followed was the clear sound of footsteps on the stairs. A beautiful figure slowly appeared in everyone's line of sight. This woman was around 25 years old. She was dressed in yellow silk and her skin was slightly plump. Her figure was graceful and enchanting. Her entire body emitted a mature and seductive aura, firmly attracting the gazes of many people. There were even many people in the living room who revealed deep infatuation in their eyes when they saw this beautiful figure. Moreover, there was a group of people following behind this woman. All of them were full of energy and their temples were bulging. Clearly, they weren't ordinary people. After Zhuowen indifferently glanced at the woman in yellow, his gaze landed on a man with an insolent gaze beside her. Coldness blossomed in his gaze and it was piercingly cold. This was because Yun wasn't unfamiliar with this insolent man. It was Du Tao, the person who snatched his freshman contribution points at the plaza outside the dean's study room. However, this Du Tao suffered a double loss in the end. In the end, he was defeated by Zhuowen. Not only did he spit out all the contribution points that he snatched, even the contribution points that he originally had were all snatched away by Zhuowen. After seeing this Du Tao, Zhuowen already knew that this group of people didn't come with good intentions. It's the people from the Emperor Pavilion. I didn't expect this person to know the people from the Emperor Pavilion. The people in the living room soon saw the picture drawn on the robes of this group of people. The picture was of a wild and unruly man with his head raised and gazed at the sky. His gaze was arrogant, as though he was provoking the heavens. This picture was the symbol of the Emperor Pavilion. It was also the picture that all members of the Emperor Pavilion had to have on their robes. After recognizing the identity of this group of people, fear appeared in the eyes of everyone. The Emperor Pavilion's influence in the outer academy wasn't small. There were as many experts as there were clouds in the sect. It wasn't something that ordinary students could afford to offend. Junior Zhuowen, seems like it's really a coincidence. We just left not long ago and we already met again. Du Tao, who was beside the yellow-robed woman, glared at Zhuowen with hatred as he spoke in an ambiguous tone. That's right. It's really a coincidence. We still have to thank Senior Du Tao for the contribution points from before. Now that Senior Du Tao is here again, I'm sure you have quite a few contribution points on you. Are you planning to gift them to Junior? Zhuowen mocked. Du Tao clenched his fists as his eyes turned red. This Zhuowen was getting more and more outrageous. He actually dared to mock him in front of his face. This caused Du Tao to fly into a rage out of humiliation. So this brat is the #1 new student, Zhuowen? It said that this brat snatched away the contribution points of He Tao and Du Tao. Even He Tao and Du Tao weren't a match for this brat. No wonder the three Spirit Void brothers lost so miserably. Everyone in the guest hall finally had a look of understanding on their faces. No wonder this new student's strength was so terrifying. So it turned out that he was the Zhuoan that everyone was talking about. Also, this Du Tao brought people from the Emperor Pavilion here. Most probably, they didn't come here with good intentions. This was especially so for the yellow-robed woman in the lead. Her strength was unfathomable. Many people here couldn't see through her cultivation base. The reason for this was most probably because her cultivation base far surpassed theirs. Although this woman had an enchanting appearance, she was most probably a rose with thorns. Although she was beautiful, she wasn't easy to touch. Just a touch would cause one to be injured. I heard that you snatched Du Tao's contribution points? The yellow-robed woman suddenly stomped her foot. Her beautiful eyes curled up in a dangerous arc as she spoke in an indifferent tone. He snatched the contribution points of us new students. Could it be that we can't snatch them from him as well? Zhuan pointed at Du Tao as he coldly replied. The yellow-robed woman nodded. What you said makes sense. Since Du Tao snatched the contribution points of you new students naturally can snatch the contribution points of Du Tao as well. However, there's one thing you neglected. Du Tao is a member of our Emperor Pavilion. You beat up a member of our Emperor Pavilion and even snatched away his contribution points. This is a provocation to our Emperor Pavilion. The meaning of the yellow-robed woman's words was very clear. Zhuan wasn't wrong to snatch Du Tao's contribution points. However, Du Tao was a member of the Emperor Pavilion. Zhuan sneered. How laughable. You mean that I should be snatched by members of your Emperor Pavilion and not allowed to retaliate? That's only natural. The yellow-robed woman naturally replied. Hence, if you hand over all your contribution points now, as well as the jade key in your hand, kneel down and apologize to Du Tao, our Emperor Pavilion won't pursue your offense this time around. Zhuowen's expression gradually turned cold. This yellow-robed woman was truly tyrannical. Wasn't her way of doing things the same as allowing the government to burn the place but not allowing the commoners to light the lamps? Also, this yellow-robed woman's request was so overbearing. How could Zhuan agree to such an unfair request? Have you considered? The yellow-robed woman spoke again. I've considered. Zhuan calmly replied. The lips of the yellow-robed woman curled up. Seems like you are an intelligent person. You should be prepared to comply with my request, right? Scram. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.